Hello. Sorry for being late, everybody. Apologize. Been a busy day. I haven't even eaten yet today. I'm starving. Actually, I think it's better like this. Who's in the chat? Who's out there? I see people are there. Hello, effing Music Man. Hello, Kyle Fishman. See, I knew people were there. I knew it. Hello, Dennis. Dennis the Menace, baby. Hello, Spencer Lieb. Nedhead says, hi from Wyoming. I know you're always here, effing Music Man. I appreciate that. Rich, hoo-hoo. Hoo-hoo to you, Rich. Coo-coo-ka-choo to you, Rich. I'm drinking a protein shake. 1 minute. Sorry, I'm starving. I need to get a meal, though. I'm just eating chips. Am I feeling liberated? Not really. Hello, Debbie Smith. JD Emo. Oh, sorry for... Yeah, my invisibility shield was on. Nambi says, we have a crazy man in the Oval Office, yet Congress does nothing. You're not wrong. FN Music Man says, you're supporting the Dodgers on the day they went to the White House? Oh, I didn't even think about that. I just have... My hair's too long, so I'm just wearing a hat. Cricket. Tonto the Fat Cat. Ian. You don't know many people who eat on camera? This is a mukbang with chips. Liberated from the S&P and 401k money. Yeah. No doubt. Hakeem says, how did we lose the 24 election? I don't know. I don't think anybody really knows. And if they tell you they do know, be skeptical. Sam, what the hell did you Americans do to the world? I didn't do anything. I didn't put on the tariffs. I didn't even vote for the guy who put on the tariffs. Tonto says, my opinion is because we switched candidates way too late. That could be. What's your thoughts on SCOTUS blocking the judge's order today on tonight's deadline to return the immigrant? I think it's terrible. I think it's horrific. Cohen says, I know, Sam, but I'm hopeful that Democrats will win an absolute landslide next year. It's looking that way right now, at least. AOC would make a good nominee. I like AOC. I'm pro AOC. I don't know if she's about to be president, but Content says AOC will be my girlfriend one day. I think she's married or engaged. So it seemed like it was opposite day in the stock market. Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. The title of today's episode, what happened with the stock market? It plunged, then it recovered based off of this report, but then the White House said that there was some negotiations or something. I don't know exactly what happened. So it recovered, but then the White House said that whatever report they were basing their recovery on was BS. So it went back down, I think. Let's check. Let's check the Dow. Well, let's just take the stock market first. Bernie's doing a CNN town hall Wednesday night. Didn't know that. How am I doing? I'm doing good. I mean, does the Trump insanity affect me? I mean, it affects everybody. I mean, if you're, unless you're really rich or really poor, it's probably affecting you. You know what I mean? So the Nasdaq ended a little, with a slight gain, but the S&P and the Dow both went down today overall. Let's see what the Dow did. Yeah, so it dropped right away, then sort of climbed back up, then dropped, then climbed a little, then dropped, then climbed a little, then dropped, and then it climbed a little bit and kind of evened out through the afternoon. One of the wildest days, I think, on the stock market in recent memory, for sure. Just, the volatility of it, the up and down nature. Black Melancholy said it closed much higher than what I expected. Yeah, there was some report that came out that I think that caused this big jump. I don't know. It's just the stock market is so fickle, Do you think America is still the leader of the free world, or has it abdicated and become an unreliable ally? I think kind of both. I think it's still the leader of the free world, but it's becoming more of an unreliable ally, and time will tell if it falls from its leadership position. It's too soon to tell if it's fallen from its leadership position, but it affects the American people. They pay more for everything now. Not yet. I mean, I don't think they've taken effect yet on the prices, but I don't know. Stock whiplash in volatile trading. Hey, thanks everybody for all the 41 people who are watching. I only got 18 likes though, so make sure that you like the video. The Dow. Let's see. I think that's just a live ticker. Hello, Stefan. Yeah, Trump also threatened more tariffs today on China. I was listening to his press conference, and he's doubling down on this stuff, man. He's not backing down. And Jamie Dimon, I heard, was the guy who's the head of what JP Morgan was sent out something about like how stuff's going to get really bad. Penguins, lots of pissed off penguins, you're right. Nambi says, I guess he's slapping these tariffs on these countries in hopes that they come running for him for negotiations. Will it backfire? I don't know. I mean, that's another thing that I think is a product of this, is no one really knows what the hell's going to happen. Are people going to come and negotiate? Are people going to retaliate? Or is there going to be some sort of freeze or stale? Like, nobody seems to know. Edmar says, for taking advantage of us for decades, we have focused only on our military while the allied world comfortably focused on their people. That might be true. Is Trump talking right now? I think he's done. I was listening to it in the car. He was having a press conference with Netanyahu. I mean, he wasn't saying anything of... he wasn't saying anything that anybody needs to hear. I mean, same old, same old. I think it's over. Oh, no, it says it's still live. It doesn't look live. I think it's over. Yeah. Here it was, streamed 11 minutes ago.
News this morning, we are witnessing the rapid destruction of the market. Stock futures are plunging this morning once again as the turmoil...
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that this is having an immediate effect on the stock market. I mean, we know that for a fact, and a negative one. Congress needs to take the tariff power back. Everyone's pensions will be affected. I think they tried with Canada and Mexico in the Senate, but it's not going to pass the House. The House is so MAGA. It's not going to work.
Turmoil from President Trump's trade war is rocking markets here in the United States and around the world. Donald Trump's baseline 10% tariff across the board, it went into effect Saturday. And also so many countries are bracing for more.
I didn't realize it went into effect on Saturday.
As the targeted tariffs that he announced are set to kick in Wednesday. So far today, Hong Kong's main exchange dropped 13%. Taiwan's exchange...
Dang.
...saw its biggest one-day loss on record.
Dang.
And the S&P is now nearing a bear market defined as a drop of 20% or more from a recent peak. Add to that, billionaire hedge fund manager and Donald Trump supporter Bill Ackman is now somewhat leading Wall Street's backlash to the tariffs.
I don't care about what a billionaire has to say. You supported him, you get what you deserve, honestly. I don't care if you're scared now.
Calling Trump's tariff plan a, quote, self-induced economic nuclear winter.
Okay, that's a pretty strong way to put it.
Also saying this is...
Hello, Susie K.
...is not what we voted for. Facing all of this brutal reality, the president and his team are offering mixed messages on a key question in all of this, which is the president willing to negotiate, or are these tariffs here to stay?
I think from what I heard from his press conference, he said both can be true at the same time. So I think he's thinking like, yeah, he's willing to negotiate, but if he doesn't get the right deal, they're going to stay. That's the understanding I have of them.
Here was the president last night on the way back to Washington.
Now, I'm willing to deal with China, but they have to solve their surplus. We have a tremendous deficit problem with China. I do want to solve the deficit problem that we have with China, with the European Union and other nations. And they're going to have to do that. And if they want to talk about that, I'm open to talking.
On TV.
CNN's Matt Egan starting us off for what is going to be another rocky day. But what's happened already?
Why did the markets recover exactly? Does anybody know why the markets recovered today? Markets recover. I mean, they didn't recover, but no negotiation. The world has had enough of him. You think so? I don't know. I think there's going to be some negotiations. Because there was a rumor that he was going to remove the tariffs. Okay, got it. There was some fake news that Trump was going to pause the tariffs for 90 days. Gotcha. And then the White House. Yeah, I knew there was some rumor, and then the markets recovered a bit, and then that White House said that rumor was just that, a rumor. Olana says, hi, Sam. I think they should only charge the percentage difference of trade deficit as the tariff. No? I don't know what that means exactly. They should only charge the percentage difference of trade deficit. I don't know. I don't know what that means exactly or how you'd get to that calculation. 60 people watching, only 31 likes, guys. I'm also going to set a quick donation goal because this is my main form of income right now. So any donation is much appreciated.
Well, Kate, look, fear continues to dominate financial markets around the world. And make no...
Rich says only weak countries will negotiate. No country with any pride or spine will give to his stupid plans. I don't know, but the whole world needs America. They can't just not... I mean, unless we're going to turn into some isolationist, non-globalized world, which I guess is possible, but...
mistake. This is all about the president's decision to launch a trade war. Now, this is how bad things are. Futures are down 2%. This is...
How do they need America? Because EU, China sells a lot of stuff to the U.S., and there's a lot of trade between the two. I mean, maybe they don't need them, but at least in this current landscape, maybe things will change. Maybe they'll change how they trade, how they export, and all that jazz, but...
actually good news. This is an improvement.
Thank you, 80 Mart. There will be more gaming, don't you worry. Scooby Snacks says Zimbabwe and Vietnam are offering 0% tariffs. Is that true? Vietnam tariffs. Peter Navarro. That's according to Peter Navarro. This says Vietnam's tariff offer rejected by Trump advisor. Not a negotiation. Weird. Tonto says ultra MAGA people probably think this destruction of our economy is a move against reptilian George Soros, Illuminati, free cabal, conspiracy. I mean, it's not even that deep. I think MAGA people just think that they just eat up all of Trump's talking points. You know, we've been taken advantage of in terms of trade for decades. You know, China's become the global leader. We need to fight back. We need to not let them bully us. We need to bring manufacturing back to I mean, they just eat all that stuff. It's not even that conspiratorial.
Improvement, because overnight we saw Dow futures were down 4% or so, about 1,500 points. You mentioned the Hang Seng in Hong Kong. This was the worst day for the Hang Seng since 1997, when Asian markets were in complete crisis mode, right? And so this is an indication, though, that futures are going to open with the S&P trading just above what would be a bear market, right, which is that 20% decline. Just for some context here, if the
EU offered 0 tariffs, both sides, even before Trump's tariff stunt. No answer. That is interesting. If people are offering no tariffs and then they're saying no, right, then they must not be open to negotiation, or the negotiations they want are just like out of control, you know. Just think about it. America is a rich country. You import more than any other country. This hurts the American people the most. Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you, Rich.
S&P closed in a bear market today. This would be the second fastest bear market in history, second only to 2020 during COVID, and surpassing the 1987.
Both Trump terms.
Crash. Look at this. So this is the S&P 500 so far this year. You can see things were getting a little bit rocky in February and March, and then Liberation Day came last week when the president rolled out his tariffs. And look at this.
Liberation Day. Woo, pump.
It's gone basically straight down since then. The S&P 500 lost over 5%. trillion in value.
God dang.
After Liberation Day. Look at this complete wipeout. And you mentioned, Kate, that we are starting to hear from some notable billionaires speaking out.
I don't give a shit. I don't care what billionaires have to say.
Bill Ackman.
Call it Liquidation Day instead. That's hilarious.
Who endorsed Trump and has been a very outspoken supporter of elements of the Trump agenda. He is basically pleading with the president to change course. He put out this tweet last night. He said that the president...
It was a lengthy statement, yes.
It was. Most of his are. But he said that the president has an opportunity on Monday to call a timeout and have the time to execute on fixing an unfair tariff system. He said, alternatively, we are heading for a...
Right. Let's not forget that just like how they treated government agencies, they're treating tariffs the same. They're going in with their eyes closed with a weed whacker and just going like this, you know, and just whatever they hit, they hit. Mark Carney talks sense and likens it to Brexit, which was and is really bad for the UK. Who's Mark Carney?
A self-induced economic nuclear...
Even people who like tariffs don't even like what they're doing here. So that's probably a bad sign, right? Oh, the Canadian PM is Mark Carney.
Winter, and we should start hunkering down. And Kate, we may find out in the next few hours whether or not the president is going to heed these calls.
I mean,
he didn't. This is an older video, obviously. I mean, now news is moving so fast. This is an older video. This is from this morning.
according to his team, they're coming. This 90-day pause that he's asking for, there's no sign of it yet. Stand by to stand by. And you have some context also, just putting the beginning of the Trump administration into historical context in terms of the market.
Yeah, it's been atrocious, right? So the S&P 500, since the president was sworn in, has lost 15% of its value. This is the worst start to any presidential term since the S&P 500 launched back in the 1950s. And again, this is being driven by recession fears. We heard Goldman Sachs overnight came out and they bumped up their recession odds. They now say a 45% chance of a recession.
That's still low. I feel like it feels low. It doesn't feel like alarming to me, right? Because it's still more percent chance that there's not going to be a recession.
Although they said it would go even higher if the tariffs kick in.
Oh, okay. That's a little bit more alarming.
Worst breakfast for weight.
Morning, it's the real fallout and the ripple effects that keep on rippling from the markets, and then there's the political impact of it.
I want to see Richard Quest's reaction.
Volatility and
a smart guy.
Whiplash on Wall Street amid deepening economic uncertainty and growing global anxiety.
Yeah, U.S. markets opened deep.
Anthony says Trump is in the arsonist mode now and will claim to be the hero when he puts out his own fires. Good point.
In the red, once again, following Donald Trump's escalating trade war. But they have been fluctuating wildly for the past several hours. Here's a look at where things stand right now. The Dow down about 700 points.
This is all old information.
Or stupid, showing no signs of retreating, urging Americans not to be, quote, weak or stupid and panic.
And he's now threatening to impose new 50% tariffs on China following Beijing's retaliatory tariffs last week. The White House, meantime, is downplaying the growing economic concerns.
The market will find a bottom. It will be soon. And from there, we're going to have a bullish boom.
There doesn't have to be a recession. Who knows how the market is going to react.
This guy gives me the willies, dude. Hello, Yenny. Nan B says, I believe Trump and his buddies are making a killing off the stock market. They dumped high and now very soon will put their money back in at a low price. That's how the super rich get even richer.
In a day, in a week.
You need to reset the power of the United States of America and reset it against all our allies and our enemies alike.
It's a strategy to create a golden age in America for the American worker. That's his strategy.
A strategy with no details.
Oh, he didn't like that.
All these advisors seem to be.
That's the thing. I've talked about this before. When you hear Trump people talking about all this, they just use generalities. They don't use specifics.
Talking past each other.
Look at his
CNN
face.
Richard
His head
Quest.
buried in his hands, literally.
And it's only Monday.
There doesn't
Richard.
have to be a recession, says the US Treasury Secretary. He's right. There doesn't have to be a recession. The only problem is economic circumstances have now been put in place that most Wall Street economists of senior note say are likely to cause a recession. Goldman and others now say it's up to...
Here's the thing. You know, I'm not supporting Trump or anything, and this is affecting most Americans, but it's like we're just hearing from a lot of rich people and Wall Street executives. You know what I mean? And it's like, I don't really care what they have to say. I don't know. Maybe I should. Maybe I'm wrong.
60%. By the way, can we go back to the Dow Jones actual chart of the day, please? Just go back to that that moment. Now, you see that green spike? That is where there was a rumor that the administration was going to pause by 90 days the tariffs. Well, it was just a rumor, and the market found it was a rumor and then promptly turned in the absolute opposite direction. But now let's forget rumors. Now we have a...
80 Mart says, as your dad said, all economists disagree with each other. These tariffs might end up being great. I guess it's possible, but I don't trust Trump personally. And I think even if they do work out in the end and create this big American surplus, he's going to use them to give tax breaks to the rich. So even if the best case scenario happens and they do work out and America rebounds and we have this big surplus from tariffs, I think he's just going to give them back to rich people. I guess the only like level-headed positive thing that wouldn't have a possibly bad recourse, although I don't know, would be bringing back jobs to the U.S. If that's an outcome, that would be good. But I don't understand how that would happen, even with tariffs. Like, tariffs alone aren't going to do it because labor is so expensive in the U.S. Rich says the rich don't care. They can still afford the imports. Small businesses will go down. Yeah, that would be a bad outcome of all this. I mean, look, if you take Trump's word for all this, you probably think this is going to be a good thing. You probably think it's going to end up great. I just am not one to take Trump's word for it. Susie K says, in the long run, low income and middle class families don't have the luxury to sit down and wait and hope. Yeah, that's a good point. Very good point.
Fact. Donald Trump says he's going to increase by 50% the tariffs on China tomorrow because they've had the temerity.
I don't think that's going to happen, but what do I know? Hello, Suzanne AP.
To retaliate with the 34% tit for tat that they did. So you want a trade war? This is what it looks like. And you remember Scott Bessent's words, there doesn't have to be a recession. By the way, all...
Social Mail says, if factories do come back in a few years, they will use robots, not unskilled workers. That's another point, too. Not just that American workers are more expensive. Pretty much all industries are moving towards automated workforces. Europe just announced they're willing to cave to Trump. Alex V says, you don't trust Trump after 10 years of blatant Trump lies and Russia assets actions. I don't understand how people still act like this is even something to consider. The dude is 100% for himself and helping dictators to tear down the world. Good point. Fair points, Alex. Brian Tyler Cohen just nailed it. Trump will personally benefit. That's all. Yeah, I do think, I've said that before. I think he's thinking about this purely from his perspective.
All the rest. Howard Lutnick's comments, the economic advisor's comments, Navarro's comments, that's all just hyperbole. That's all just basically, it's going to be great, it's going to be marvelous, it's going to be fantastic, it's going to be...
That's what I've been saying. I've been saying it's all just generalities and nonsense.
Wonderful, it's going to boom, but this is the reality. And at some point, ladies and gentlemen...
Captain says the tariffs will stop countries from ripping America off. That's a good talking point, and maybe it's true, but yeah, maybe that's true. I don't know.
At some point, there is so much disruption that the market simply can't take it, and jobs go, investment stops, the recession happens.
Let's not forget, Richard, that this is an administration.
Rich says BS that tariffs will stop countries from ripping America off. Why do you say BS?
That inherited a rather robust economy where we were seeing inflation continue to go down, though not fast enough. We got a strong jobs report. Obviously, that is backward looking. But to have administration officials, specifically Stephen Miller, go out on the airwaves.
Rich says because they don't rip off America. 80 says, hey, Sam, could there be a case to be made that tax cuts for corporations also encourage them to stay or move back to America? Because I do feel like there's a plus side to that. That's called trickle-down economics. It's been proven not to work. Captain says they've been used as negotiation tactics thus far, but we haven't seen any fruit from that. We haven't seen any fruit from those negotiations.
This weekend and justify these tariffs as a need for a global reset because this administration inherited a recession or near depression is outright fabrication.
No, it's lies. Simple. Let's just call it what it is. It's lies. It's not true. The economy that Joe Biden handed over to Donald Trump was in fine fettle. Interest rates were coming down, not as fast as they'd like. Unemployment was low. Growth was medium to strong. Trend growth. The market was at record highs. It's quite simple. These are facts you cannot ignore.
Yeah, but we're also in the midst of an affordability crisis, which isn't Biden's fault, but a lot of those numbers don't take into account the fact that we're in an affordability crisis. Sometimes I get upset with these talking heads just being like, and my dad does it sometimes too. He's like, here's this number, here's this number, here's this number. Therefore, everything is fine. I don't know if it's that simple anymore.
These policies, and it's not just, by the way, the policy of this tariff trade, which is by far the worst. The immigration policy has now given cause for concern about inflation because workers won't be available. Companies are putting off decisions because they simply...
Ian says the Trump administration is planning on a June 14th military parade through the streets of D.C. to mark the president's 79th birthday. That's stupid. Trump says a trade deficit is a ripoff, but how do you expect poor countries to buy expensive American products? It makes no sense. Have these poor countries buying expensive American products? I don't know if that's true. 80 Mart says, but if they're threatened with tariffs for being abroad and then get a tax cut if they choose to move here, then I'd say that's a good thing. I don't know. I personally don't trust corporations. Their bottom line is to make as much money as humanly possible. It's not necessarily to provide as many jobs as humanly possible. It's not necessarily to treat workers right. It's not necessarily to any of that stuff. So I'm not one to celebrate, more corporations. Kyle Fisherman says, affordability crisis. Inflation was at 2% when Biden left office. Yeah, but home prices, grocery prices were all high.
We don't know the circumstance under which they will make. Now, is Donald Trump right in his policy prescription? Let's just, for the purpose of just my answer, let's assume it's a leap of faith. You have to say it is a leap of faith that he is right vis-a-vis all the conventions.
A trade deficit is when America pays more for imports than they get from exports. You can't expect poor countries to buy your stuff. It is delusional. 80 Mart says more corporations and industries equals more jobs, though, or else where else would people work? That's what I'm saying. More corporations doesn't necessarily mean more jobs. That's a myth.
conventional wisdom that says this is going to be bad.
The only thing more corporations means is that there are more corporations in America who want more money. That's all that means. Yesterday, Trump announced he will eliminate the capital gains tax in 2025. Given the economic crisis, trade war, and stock market loss, he's already eliminating all capital gains. Oh, I thought corporations were businesses. I mean, they are, but just because you're a business doesn't necessarily mean you're providing a ton of jobs or benefit to the country itself. It just means that you're a corporation making money. That's all it means.
For the growth. Now, if I tell you don't drive with blinkers on or don't drive with something over your eyes, you'd probably say it's not a good idea. But somebody says try it, you take your choice.
A leap of faith based on one man's convictions, right? Which he's held for decades.
But hang on. He held these convictions back in the 1980s. The global schemes and the global trading environment is very different to today than it was then. And it's not the policy that's wrong. You can even Ngozi at the
Yolanda says labor is cheaper, but prices will go up with U.S. manufactured goods. Rich says, take Madagascar. You buy vanilla from there because you don't produce vanilla. Madagascar is poor. They don't buy stuff from you. It will always be a trade deficit no matter how high the tariff is. Okay, I get that. I get what you're saying. Susie K says, another thing I'm concerned about is the report that the Secretary of Defense and Homeland Security will submit about the border and the recommendation they will give, including whether or not to invoke the Insurrection Act of 1807. Yeah, there's no doubt we're also dealing with a borderline fascist immigration policy with this administration. We should just let Silicon Valley move to China, huh, Sam? They already did. That's my point. Their goal is to make as much money as possible. So that's why your iPhone, all your parts are made in Asia. They don't make the parts in the US.
WTO says that the US has legitimate concerns. It's the manufacture of the execution that's the difficulty. And
Silicon Valley is kind of the picture perfect example of what's wrong when you let corporations take over. They make a very small percentage of the population very rich. I mean, if you just look at the Bay Area, I mean, that's sort of it's a perfect example of what happens when you let corporations take over. It creates massive income inequality. It creates affordability crises. A very small percentage get very, very wealthy. Again, drive up home prices, push people out of cities that they once could afford. Yeah, but these HQs employ thousands of people. Yes, Meta probably employs thousands of people. You're not wrong, but they probably could, and if they were better laws for workers and more laws against monopolization and big corporations, we could get these businesses to be more pro-worker instead of more pro-corporate. So I'm just saying, I'm not saying that Meta doesn't employ people, obviously. I'm just saying that there's a reason why. I mean, just look at the San Francisco Bay Area. It is a case study of what happens when you let these big corporations take over. There are ways to have good businesses in America, powerful businesses in America, innovative businesses in America, and also make sure that they are treating workers properly, not monopolizing, et cetera, et cetera. Isn't fascism and Nazi Germany examples of what corporate takeover looks like? I don't think so. I think that's more examples of what fascism or sort of authoritarian fascism looks like. Politica Pal says corporate greed is a very big problem here in the Bay Area, and it should have been a bigger problem than crime, as everyone would believe. Oxv says that's because everyone wants to live in California. It's not bad policy. I'm telling you, it's because of bad policy. California is a giant state. You don't think there's enough room in California to fit people in? I mean, why does everybody want to live in the Bay Area? Because that's where all the corporations are, right? It's not an issue of too many people in California. That's not the issue. It's an issue of bad policy and just letting these big corporations run a gamut on our economy. Just go totally bukus, do whatever they want to do within our economy. Thank you, Rich.
The deeper this goes, the harder it's going to be to repair the damage. Simple as that.
No doubt. Richard Quest, thank you so much.
Thank you, Richard.
I bet you Meta employs, or Apple employs, more people abroad than they do in the U.S. How many people does Apple employ abroad? And I don't actually, this might be not a good idea because I know they contract out a lot of their stuff. Like with the factories that they produce their stuff in, they don't technically employ those people. California is unique also, like New York City. Can't really compare them to regular states. I'm just citing examples within those states of places where we've let corporations take over. California is a very big, Bakersfield is nothing like the Bay Area, so I'm not making a general California analysis here. They're giving me the same answer. How many people work abroad? 164,000. How many people work in the U.S.? 164,000. Cynthia says, Bay Area residents here, the cost of living is absolutely insane. If you make anything under 100K a year, you feel like you can barely get by. Right. And that's my point. That's a symptom of letting corporations take over, and why the idea of more corporations isn't necessarily a good thing for your average person. Thank you, Stefan, for your donation. I appreciate that. 3 minutes and 22 seconds to get in this donation goal, folks.
I almost accepted the dark circles.
When I'm on like incognito mode, I get the weirdest commercials, dude.
Of what these White House and cabinet officials said on the Sunday shows, and today trying to defend what Trump is trying to do and trying to explain what he's trying to do.
I've seen some deals that are great, and President Trump is going to decide.
That's why liberals suck at governing, though, Sam. California is a disaster. You can call on trickle down all you want, but the Democrat side ain't any better. I'm not defending Democrats in California and their policies that they've enacted. I don't know enough about it, and I've seen examples of them doing not good things. But this idea that like California is a disaster. I mean, California, the economy of California is bigger than like most countries. And if you look at red states like Alabama, Louisiana, Arkansas, like their quality of life is much, much lower than California, and their economy is much, much lower than California. I'm not saying either one is better than the other, but this idea that only California is a disaster in the United States is just factually incorrect.
If they're great enough.
Listen, we've got 50 countries that are burning the phone lines into the White House up, and probably the president's cell phone as well.
So start negotiating. What are you waiting for?
There's no postponing. They are definitely going to stay in place for days and weeks.
Thank you, Susie.
So when you say to me, Ed, what do we want from them? We want fairness.
I mean, at the end of the day, the overriding theme is just trust Trump.
Yes, though I will say we are starting to see a little bit of a division.
And just to be clear, I'm not saying like businesses or corporations even at their base are like evil or bad. I'm saying when you get corporate takeover and you have this, you know, uber capitalism where we're driven by Wall Street and Coca-Cola and Apple, I'm saying that's when there's scaling to this, right? And we're too far in the other direction. We need to scale it back. It's big, but it ain't working for the people. Housing is much cheaper elsewhere. Even Ezra Klein made a video on this where he praised red states for lower regulation and easier to build. Again, I'm not defending every policy that Dems in California have done. I mean, the little research I've done on regulation and housing, I don't know how much of a difference it makes. But yeah, obviously it's cheaper to live in Alabama than it is in California, but also your income and salaries and minimum wage, all those things are much lower in Alabama too. So I don't know. Hello, Jeanette. Thank you for your donation. Appreciate that. Cheaper in Florida? Yeah, it's probably cheaper in Florida than California, generally speaking, but it's not like Florida is cheap. I mean, Florida is still a very expensive place to live. And maybe certain taxes are lower in Florida, but there are other taxes that are higher. I heard someone talk about this the other day, that like if you actually crunch down all the taxes between Florida and California, yes, income tax isn't as high in Florida, but like sales tax is higher. And like when you crunch all the numbers, there's not that big of a difference in affordability between, or at least taxability between Florida and California. And again, it depends where you live in these states too, because Miami is just as expensive as LA, if not more expensive, actually. Maybe you could live in Orlando for cheaper, but then you could probably live in Bakersfield, California for cheaper. Insurance is super expensive in Florida. I mean, in Southern California, at least, insurance is really expensive. Nikki says Tampa is just expensive as Maryland now, but jobs in Florida suck. Again, I am not here to defend policies of California or, you know, talk bad about red states. I'm just saying this idea that we only have issues in blue states these issues that we're talking about, affordability issues or salary issues, or that this only exists in blue states in these liberal cities like California or San Francisco and LA. It's like, it's just not true. Adalia says Tennessee has no state income tax, but highest sales tax, and it makes groceries painful. And that's the thing. I feel like we often are just seeing these influencers and rich people and actors and comedians who are like, I'm good, and they all lived in California, and they're like, I'm getting out of California. Why? Because they make a lot of money and they don't want their income taxed. They're not as worried about the cost of their groceries, right? So they move to states like Tennessee and Florida where the income tax is lower, but sales tax is higher. And to a rich person, that doesn't hurt as much. But to your average American, sales taxes can still ding you, you know? There are lots of maps and stuff that show, like, you know, affordability across America. And there's no doubt that California is really bad and New York is really bad. But again, so is Florida. And yeah, maybe things are cheaper in Texas, but they pay a lot less than Texas. The average salary is lower in Texas, and the minimum wage is lower. So there's always trade-offs.
Even among Trump officials, obviously there's nobody that speaks for the Trump administration that is going to outright criticize the president's overall strategy here. But I think in addition to the officials that are saying, look, you got to just trust that he knows what
It's the same with crime. Like if you look at like a crime map of the U.S., like per capita, it's not in. I mean, yes, crime is high in San Francisco and L.A. and D.C. Let's see if I can find it. But if you look at the per capita crime, it's much higher in red states. So here's per capita crime. The reddest sections are the Deep South. Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, Missouri, parts of New Mexico, which is a blue state. But if you look at California, it's not as red as some of these red states. And I'm not saying that these red states are bad places or you shouldn't live there. I'm just saying that the right-wingers who are telling you that California is some sort of crime haven and it's all because of blue policy and blue states. Look at this map right here. Reported crime per incident per 1,000 people. Massachusetts, blue state, almost very little crime. New York, blue state, very little crime. Purple state, very little crime. Maryland, D.C., and Baltimore, a little bit higher. Virginia, bluish, purple, reddish state, very little crime. I'm just saying, when you look at the stats, it's not this dystopian life in blue states and this perfect life in red states. Yeah, maybe there's a bigger homeless problem. Yeah, there's a lot of homeless people in California. That is true. Again, I'm not here to defend California. I'm just saying this idea that blue states and blue cities are dystopian, crime-ridden, infested, and red states are these havens of affordability and low crime and et cetera, is just, look at this map right here. Where do you see the reddest and purple sections? In the Deep South, in the red states. And again, I'm not knocking them because of it. I'm just saying that's the hard facts. Kyle Fishman says Florida is the worst for climate change. Yeah, Florida and Southern Cal and most of California are really bad in terms of climate future. I agree with you. And there's a really good PBS Terra talks a lot about weather and climate, and they have some really good pieces. I think since living in LA and living through the fires, it's made me really more interested in climate and all that stuff. And I forgot which one it was, but they had one that was talking about which areas are going to be the worst, and it's Southern Florida and Southern California. California has fire problems, but not hurricanes. Look, California has earthquakes, which isn't climate related stuff. They have droughts, they have extreme heat, and they have wildfires. That's pretty bad. Florida has sea level rise and hurricanes. That's also pretty bad. So they're both bad. I want to see if I can find this. Although, do you think PBS will claim me? Rich, the other day when you warned me about 60 Minutes, dude, they claim me. Assholes. I just cut it out of the segment, but yeah, but earthquakes aren't really climate related. I'm just talking about climate. I'm not saying, Florida is some utopia. I just moved out of there, so where is it? Let me see if I can find it. This might be it. Why were you in Florida? I wasn't. I meant to say California.
21, just one.
No, this isn't it. This might be it.
All right,
Yeah, this is it. I'm just gonna show you the end because I think I don't want to get claimed, and they show a map here. I think this is it of the two highest risk places due to climate change.
At risk.
So they absorb heat and re-radiate that at night, and we get the urban heat island.
So, in your opinion, what is the place that is most at risk?
This is a very skewed scale. It goes from 0.5 to 20. So South Florida, parts of the mouth of the Mississippi near New Orleans, and Los Angeles County, they're screaming at us for help.
There you go.
0.5 to 20. So South Florida, parts of the mouth of the Mississippi.
I just feel like people are, they see Ben Shapiro being like, I'm moving out of California. California is a wasteland. Everything in California is terrible. I'm moving to Florida. Florida is perfect. And it's like, it's not, dude.
Near New Orleans and Los Angeles County, they're screaming at us for help.
I mean, I love this map. It really.
I mean, you can see here, like, the Gulf region, Southern California, and Southern Florida. And just Florida, I mean, look how spotted. I mean, this is climate risk, right? Going from low climate risk to high climate risk. Like, yeah, there are some areas up in the Northeast, probably mostly because of sea level rise, that are also at risk. But I mean, Florida, Southern California, and the Gulf region are screwed. I mean, he made it pretty clear. People see Joe Rogan. It's like, yeah, man, like, I'm getting out of California. I'm going to Austin. It's like, I'm pretty sure this is Austin here, right? That looks pretty high climate risk. And what I've heard about Austin is people move there and they hate it. So it's like, I don't know. There are pros and cons to every area. You have to figure out which area you like. And this idea that blue states are dystopian societies full of crime, again, all you gotta look at is the stats, really. You like that impression, Cricket, of Ben Shapiro? That was good.
What he's doing, we have to.
Let's go back to Trump. Enough of my tangent about rhetoric around blue and red states.
To give this time, this is ultimately going to end up in a good place in the medium to long term. We're seeing an emphasis on the countries that are wanting to negotiate, essentially officials that are coming out and saying it's not the worst idea. If you're interested in negotiating, the time is now. I think those are two distinctly.
Again, you got to think about, like, if you're a rich person, if you're Joe Rogan, if you're Ben Shapiro, if you're one of these guys who has a lot of income, moving to Florida is going to make a huge difference in your income tax, right? And you're going to pay the same sales tax as everybody else, so it's not going to hit you as bad.
Different views. You talked about two camps existing in the Trump world. There's the idea that what Trump is doing right now is going to eventually course correct on its own. And then there's a separate idea that these negotiations need to happen in order for that to happen.
Like, theoretically, Ben Shapiro in California probably pays hundreds of $1,000s, if not millions of dollars in income tax, right? In terms of the increase of sales tax for him, we're probably talking about a couple $1,000s a year. So to him, that's a huge advantage to move to Florida because he's making millions of dollars. But if you're not making millions of dollars, that sales tax is going to hurt you a lot more than it'll hurt him. And the no income tax is not going to help you as much as it would help him.
I'm not sure exactly where President Trump.
Sam, did you attend any of the protests? No, I honestly forgot. I forgot what was I doing Saturday? Oh, it was my friend's birthday party. So I was at my friend's birthday, and he was like, "So weird driving up here. I saw all these protests," and I was like, "Oh right, it's the protest day." Would it be safe to assume that Democrats lost in 24 because they failed to tell the truth briefly to all? I don't know. Social media says, most of my NYC family retired to condos in Florida for the weather. They return back north after massive hurricane damage every fall. That's another issue. I mean, again, these are issues both in climate and weather issues are issues, as we saw, both in Southern California and Florida. But insurance, repair costs, are going to balloon for people living in those states. Cost of living and homeless issue is what's driving the max exodus from California. More people leaving California and New York than Florida. Not to say there's no crime in LA, and because, people are free to leave. I'm not saying they shouldn't leave or they should leave, but this idea that Florida is some haven for like a perfect life is not true, and that California is some like dystopian society is just not true. The reality of living in both those places don't back that up, and the facts don't back that up. And again, it's a personal choice. If income tax and homelessness is a big problem for you, you should probably move out of California. But if income tax and homelessness isn't a big issue for you, then, and you enjoy the weather of California, you enjoy the lifestyle, you have a good job, Florida's not going to provide anything else to you. Amber says, say goodbye to any chance anyone ever had of an affordable home. Yeah, that's a big issue. Fry says, Florida is really a shithole. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that people trying to convince you that Florida is some beacon for a perfect life are probably misleading you.
Falls right now. I don't think that most people.
And again, it doesn't mean I'm saying stay in California. California is the beacon of perfect life. There are issues in California too. I'm not denying that.
No, and that's obviously the key thing. And I think it's also why we should be watching Netanyahu's visit to the White House really closely. Does he come out of there having effectively negotiated and gotten himself a better deal?
Yeah, because that's the thing. It's not just two camps existing in Trump world. Trump has said both things in different social media posts. He'll say these tariffs are here to stay. We're going to reconfigure the U.S. economy. We're going to bring more manufacturing domestically. This is about a complete reset. But then in a different post, he'll say, look at all these countries coming to negotiate. My plan is working. So I think that's where the business leaders are saying, well, what can we trust when we don't quite know the plan, because it can't necessarily be both things. Are these tariffs a negotiating tool, which means they may be temporary and there will be pain, but it could pay off in the long term? Or are these tariffs about moving manufacturing into the U.S., which will be a long-term problem for a lot of these business leaders, and they don't necessarily want to hear that. I also think saying both allows some of these Republican leaders, it buys them time, because they can say, hey, this is just a negotiating tool. We're going to wait it out.
I've talked to a lot of those business executives, some of whom are in touch directly with the White House about what this is going to look like. And they're saying, hey, we would rather pay or pass on to consumers $20 million in tariffs than spend $5 billion to build a new factory in a country with whom we don't know what relations are going to look like in the next administration or under the next party's leadership. And they are very frustrated because during Trump's first term, where he was primarily targeting China, a lot of them moved their factories to Vietnam. And they're saying, hey, wait a second, we did this for you in 2019, and now Vietnam's getting hit with the 46% tariff. What are we supposed to do? We're just going to ride this out.
And, meantime, there's the optics of all this, right? Trump is always concerned about how he's viewed in the media and the like. And the message that they wanted to send, this was a decision by Trump and his team, is to tell folks about his golf game this weekend.
Really?
How was the golf tournament?
Very good.
How much have we spent on Trump golfing? That's what I want to know. And he goes to Florida like every weekend, right? How much do we spend on that?
It's good to win. You heard I won, right? Did you hear I won? Yeah. Just to back it up, you were there, I won.
And then on Saturday, as the
That's funny. Those are the moments I find Trump kind of funny. I won. I'm the best golfer ever.
These tariffs were going out, they decided, the White House put out a statement saying that.
Cynthia says he constantly criticized Obama for golfing. Yes, he did. But you have to realize Trump is not one to be. He has no shame. He's perfectly fine being a hypocrite.
The president won his second.
And none of his supporters seem to care that he's a hypocrite.
Second round matchup of the Senior Club Championship today in Jupiter, Florida, and advances to the championship round. tomorrow. Sometimes presidents, if they're in the middle of economic turmoil, maybe they would go to a factory or something or try to make their case publicly. Trump he's doing what he's doing.
And I'm not saying like a president shouldn't be able to golf, but again, there's a balance to it. Should he be flying to Florida every single weekend and spend, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying presidents need to de-stress, they need to work out, they need to play golf. That's fine. But there's a balance to it.
Does go hand in hand with a strategy. If there was a coherent strategy we all understood, that would fit with it. Having the president be completely unbothered, not going on TV to calm the markets, saying, no, the markets are going to figure out what I'm doing sooner or later. It's everything else that you were just talking about.
Social media says, no city is perfect, all advantages and drawbacks, but climate change is an important factor to take into account, especially given Trump's climate change denial policies. No doubt.
Is going golfing while we are figuring out if this is worth investing in, if we're willing to plan for 4 years ahead or not. I don't think that is necessarily a bad look for what.
Cynthia says, exactly. Presidents deserve time off like everyone else, but they need to be conscious of the frequency and the timing of their time off. You said it perfectly, Cynthia. You said it perfectly, Cynthia.
Senior White House So let's get right to it with NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez, NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans, Justin Wolfers, professor of economics and public policy at the University of Michigan.
I mean, the unfortunate thing is climate change is going to affect everybody everywhere across the United States. I don't think anybody's going to be immune to it. There are places that are going to be worse hurt than others, but at this point, it seems like we're at the point of no return.
Michigan and Reuters.
I mean, just look at this map. This map will tell you everything. Yellow places are pretty low risk. Follow the map. And the Northeast is pretty high. I know a lot of population centers are really high. The Northeast, Southern California, Southern Florida, like these are high population areas. Jeanette says a lot of folks in Florida don't believe in climate change. Such a shame. Yeah, I don't, at this point, I don't understand that. Like, especially if you're living in Florida and you're living with the constant threat of climate disasters, it's like, how can you not believe in it? I don't know. It's happening to you. The climate is the end boss for humanity. Yeah, it's a scary thought. I mean, I wonder, especially like people like Trump, people who have so much influence. Does he just think that? You think he really doesn't believe in climate change? Like he thinks it's a total hoax, or do you think he's just that evil and greedy, or do you think he just thinks like, eventually we'll figure it out and we'll adapt to it? It's hard to wrap my mind around their thinking around it. Again, because it's happening right now. It's not like 10, 15 years ago where it was more existential. Jeanette says he doesn't give a fuck. He believes it and he doesn't care. He's 78. But he has grandchildren and children that he loves. Like, I think he knows, but he needs the votes from conspiracy nuts. Yeah, but he's taking actions. Like, it would be one thing if his rhetoric was anti-climate and his actions were a little bit more middle of the road, but he wants to keep drilling and end renewable, and like his actions are also really anti-climate. And if it was just to get votes, I feel like it might just exist in his rhetoric and not other places. Trump doesn't have any beliefs one way or the other. He just says whatever he needs to pander to his followers. That might be true. Philip H. says, I generally believe he wouldn't shed a tear if his entire family died. I don't buy that. I've seen him interact with his family before. It seems like he loves them. I don't know. I think, here's my theory. I think he probably believes it's real and he thinks humans will just figure it out. That's the best hypothesis I have. I don't know. And he figures that it's better to keep business booming, and eventually we'll figure it out. Blaze says, Sam, Trump is a sociopath who does not care about anyone but himself. He's pure evil. I don't know. Maybe I'm naive, but I'm not that far deep on him. Rich says Hitler loved his family too. I didn't know that. I don't know, man. But I highly, I mean, this one was just on PBS, but if you've started to become like a climate nerd and weather nerd, and this documentary, this one about the LA fires, is really good and enlightening. I highly recommend this one, the real story of the LA fires. But this channel, PBS Terra, generally, I highly recommend. January 6th is proof he is evil, along with him downplaying COVID, killing thousands of people. I think that is interesting to bring up COVID and January 6th. I do think he will rationalize in his mind anything that helps him. I do believe that. Clotica passes, I am sounding the alarm that disinformation is another type of election meddling, an actual fraud. The keys are only wrong when there is significant election interference. I think that's a fair point. Cynthia says if Trump's kids spoke out against him, he would cut them out of his will and talk shit about them. He's a narcissist. Look how Elon treats his trans daughter. That's a good point, actually. Yeah, he loves them. It seems like he loves them, but they also support him unwillingly. If they stop supporting him, that might change. Ian says, I wish Putin had offered him Trump Moscow Hotel in 2015 so he wouldn't have gone into politics. Damage avoided. I never thought about it like that before. Trump told people at his rallies that he didn't care for them. He just wanted their votes. Yeah. I guess I'm more convinced that it's more like he will convince himself of anything for his own personal gain, and he doesn't really think about the consequences of that. That's kind of where I'm at right now after listening to you guys.
White House correspondent Jeff Mason. Christine, I'd like to start with you. What are we seeing with the markets right now? There was this crazy blip earlier this morning when it sounded like there was a rumor that these tariffs might be delayed. Did that go away? Just please tell us where we are.
It was so insane. I mean, that is an official technical market term. Look, I was on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange when this happened. Suddenly you had like a huge rally in the stock market on talk. Everyone screaming that the president was going to pause these tariffs for 90 days, except for China. And we know from Bill Ackman, the billionaire who was a Trump supporter, he had told the president, he had said in a post, hey, the president should pause these things. Anyway, the whole thing turned into a rumor that ran through the internet and ran through the markets, and then suddenly was debunked and the market came down again. I think what it shows you is just how jumpy everyone is. It shows you just
Hello, Tim Mikowski. What's up?
How concerned people are about every single whiff of news, even rumors about what's happening in the trade war. And it just shows you how important this trade war is to the future of the U.S. economy and the global economy. What you heard from Bill Ackman, he called for a nuclear winter in the economies around the world if these tariffs aren't taken off. So just a very, very jumpy, edgy, and just dread is the word I would.
What ball game are you watching, Tim?
Would use in the investment community right now?
I mean, it's so dire, Gabe. The president was asked specifically about whether or not he's trying to intentionally tank stocks. You know, he was golfing this weekend when this 10% tariff hit. Can you talk about the optics here?
Well, Christina, the White House really doesn't seem to care, at least.
Fry, you keep going on about trailer parks in Florida. I mean, there are trailer parks everywhere, guys. And trailer parks don't make or break a state necessarily. How much has Trump spent on golf? Taxpayers' tab for Trump's golf during second term reaches milestone, report says. And this is like a few days old now. American taxpayers have now spent more than $26 million on President Donald Trump's golf outings at his own courses during his second term. So that's not even... how many days has he been in office? January 20th, right? How many days ago was that? Okay. What day? He started the 20th, right? So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 66, 67, 68, 69. So about 70 days to March 30th when this was written? No. Yes. 70 days. So is it 26 million? Oops. Is it 7 divided by 26 million or 26 million divided by 7? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3 divided by 70. Is that how we get to it? No, it's the other way around. 70 divided by 26 million. No, it is the other way around. Sorry. So does that mean that we've been a day? Like if you break that down to per day, that's $371,000 a day since he's taken office just to play golf. He's not playing golf every day. $371,428 approximately per day. That could pay for, so that's 70 days. That could pay for like, I don't know, what does your average government employee make? Like $70,000 a year? $26 million divided by 70,000. What is that? That could pay for like 300 plus 370 plus yearly salaries for a government worker. Cynthia says, someone alert Doge. We have some waste and abuse. Yeah. And again, look, the president, it costs money to have a president. We get that, right? He travels, he works, he eats, he golfs, and that's fine. But like $26 million in his first couple months in office, that's crazy.
Not publicly. They are doubling down on all this. And just a short time ago, as you said, President Trump posting on social media that he is threatening a 50% tariff against China if they don't withdraw their retaliatory tariff. Now, look, yes, the president over the past few days spent a bunch of his time in his golf course in Florida, but I spoke with a White House official just this morning who stressed that he was still doing work, and they don't seem too bothered by some of the response they've been getting from even some Republicans who are worried about the effect that these tariffs will have on many Americans, on their retirement accounts. But the White House just sees this as something that needs to happen, as you just mentioned, that the president's saying that this is medicine. They've been running with that metaphor for the last several days, even as the Dow continues to drop there. And they really see this as a kind of rejiggering of the global economy and something that he is not backing off of, Christina.
Jeff, there's also been a bit of mixed messaging as to whether the purpose of this is to start a negotiation or whether these things are not negotiable. The White House says 50 countries have requested tariff talks, and Israel is going to be the first to negotiate in person today.
Wait, Rich, $438 million in his first 4 years to play golf. Is that actually true? Is that fact checked? That's crazy. That can't be. That can't be. Although maybe if it's 26 million in 3 months, 4 years.
Today, Israel, who were reportedly offered to go.
Yeah, so January, February to March. Yeah, you took my numbers, 26 million. That's crazy. So if he keeps at this clip in 4 years, it'll be $438 million for him to play golf. That's not right.
To mutually zero tariffs. What do we expect out of that meeting?
Well, I think for sure that they're going to be talking about tariffs at that meeting. Obviously, there are a lot of other topics that will be coming up in a meeting between the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of Israel, not least of which the war in Gaza. But
you know what I bet Trump will say about that 26 million number? That's fake news, made up number.
Tariffs are at the top of the list for President Trump right now for all countries that he feels have treated the United States unfairly, and Israel is one of them, despite that close relationship, despite the fact that we've been allies for.
Tim says, especially since how much they bitched about Obama and Biden golfing. Guys, Republicans are not worried about being hypocrites. That's so clear now. And they don't care because it doesn't hurt them either. So they're going to keep being hypocrites, and we can keep whining about it, but they're going to keep being hypocrites.
For decades, but that same criteria applies to all of the countries that President Trump has imposed tariffs on, and he's keeping them on until or unless they reduce theirs. And you asked about deals and mixed messaging. There certainly has been some, but I think it is fair to assume, based on what the president has said, because let's remember it's his final word that matters at the end, that if other countries come and offer him a deal and he takes it and or negotiates it further, then that's something that President Donald Trump wants. He considers himself a deal maker, and he applies that to this as well.
And to that point, Justin, the president now says he's only going to negotiate if countries zero out the trade deficit. Let's take a listen.
Yeah, and I'm just like, okay, so how does this 61-year-old...
They're dying to make a deal, but I said, we're not going to have deficits with your country. We're not going to do that, because to me a deficit is a loss. We put a big tariff on Europe. They are coming to the table. They want to talk, but there's no talk.
Kuya, what's up?
Unless they pay us a lot of money on a yearly basis.
Justin, I will fully admit to getting a not.
See what he said there? There's no talk unless they pay us a lot of money on a yearly basis. I kind of feel like even 0% tariffs aren't going to be enough for him. He wants more. I don't know what that means exactly. Like, or maybe he's just talking about a tariff there. I don't know exactly. But I kind of feel like he wants more. Tim says he doesn't understand deficits. Yeah, Rich pointed that out earlier. Seems like he doesn't understand what what deficits are exactly.
Nice grade in my grad school economics class. But is that how trade deficits work?
Here we go.
Most of these are free economies. Can you make a top-down policy to instantly level out a trade deficit, or is that a more market-driven figure?
Not only can you not do it, you don't want to do it. This is someone who, Christina, I don't care how poorly you did in your graduate school economics. You still did better than this bloke.
This guy's awesome. This is Aussie. Aussie. Oi, oi, oi.
Look, here's the way to think about it. I have a trade deficit with Trader Joe's. I go to Trader Joe's once a week and I buy a bunch of stuff, so I'm buying stuff from them. And when I'm at Trader Joe's, I say to them, I'm here, I'm willing to sell you economics lectures. And for some reason, they never buy anything from me. The question is, could I immediately...
Jones says 886,000 for 30 days, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. Remember, just 200,000 per hour for Air Force One. So you're saying it's even more per day because he only golfs on weekends. Is that what you're saying?
Remedy that trade deficit? The only way to do that would be by stopping buying anything from Trader Joe's altogether. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of how...
I get it now.
Global trade works. And the terrifying thing is, this isn't just me coming to you. This is every economist in the United States, with the exception of one, That one is Peter Navarro, who turns out to be the convicted felon who's currently
Ooh, them fighting words. Got him.
advising the president. What he needs to do is look outside the White House and get some advice from someone else, because this is pure destruction.
I also want to ask you, Justin, you said the pain is going to be 50 times worse than what Trump's first-term policies created. Is that hyperbolic? Do you really believe that? And how are we going to really fundamentally feel it change our lives here in the U.S.?
No, sir.
Political says, this is terrifying. That's funny. Rich says, it's like I said, he wants bribes. The trade deficits won't go away for a rich country like the U.S. Limited Light says, okay, I won't do any grading while listening this time, but who else was at the protest Saturdays besides me? Let's do a poll. Did you protest? I didn't, just so you know. Did you protest Saturday? Okay, we'll do it. We'll do yes, no, and then I don't live in the U.S. because it's not fair to ask the people who don't live in the U.S. to protest, you know? Do I believe that the mainstream media doubles standards on lowering the bar for Trump and raising it for Biden and Harris, as well as their sane washing of Trump cost Dems to 24? Claudia Capel, I think you asked me multiple times a day, did X Factor cost the Dems the 24 election? I don't know, bro. I don't think there's one factor. I think there's many factors. I think all the factors you say are very smart and probably have played a role, but I can't answer those questions, bro. Do that poll tomorrow night, yeah.
So that is a very literal estimate. The logic of this is, I'm not going to get into this part of it, which is the cost of a tariff rises with the square of a tariff. So small tariffs, small problems, big tariffs, big squared problems. I mean, how does this play out for you and I? Well,
I think Trump honestly believes that, like, he wants Vietnam to buy more from us than we buy from them. I think he does honestly believe that.
Next time you go to the grocery store, just pick a...
As unlikely or as economically insane as that is, I think he actually is thinking like that.
Few things off the shelf, and rather than checking out the price, check out where it came from. You'll discover that all of our lives are profoundly...
No, Colonizing Mars, you don't need to spam. You don't need to feel bad. I'm just saying... I don't think there's one answer. I think all of your theories that you put forward are fair, but I can't say whether or not they are the reason or not a reason. You know what I mean?
Integrated with people all around the world. And even if it says made in America, it's probably made in America, often with ingredients or inputs from abroad. And then go to work and think about certainly your job, your work is being exported all around the world. And so what's going to happen is effectively President Trump is cutting you and I off from all
potential effects of Trump's tariffs. The average household spending will go up $3,800 a year. Pay for lowest income households will go down 4% a year. I don't get that. Pay? Oh, the pay, like how much they make, will go down 4% a year. Price of shoes will go up 18%, clothes 17%, rice 10%, cars 8%, produce 4%.
All of the glorious variety and richness that we get from engaging with the rest of the world.
And Gabe, you heard Justin talk about how it's been few and far between economists who think this is going to be a good idea.
Dennis says Trump represents the dangers of ultra positive thinking with zero fact checks. That's a good point.
We're also starting to hear from business leaders, including, ironically, Elon Musk, who said over the weekend he wants free trade with the EU. There were big hands-off protests across the country this weekend. What typically happens when the president feels backed into...
Tim says, I heard the highest end iPhone could go for up to $2,300. Damn. One thing that makes they treat bread, we have plenty of wheat. But isn't it true that like a lot of our agriculture, isn't like, I've heard crazy stats before that like we give China all of our wheat and they give all of us, and then they give us all of their wheat. Like we trade back and forth the same product. I don't know if that's true, but I feel like I've heard that before.
To a corner. Do we expect this to alter his behavior in one way or another?
No. When has any protest or any accountability ever altered Trump's behavior? That's a ridiculous question.
well, Christina. He typically lashes out. Not indication that he feels backed in a corner quite just yet.
With the
I'm gonna look this guy up, Justin Wolfers. See if we can find any Justin. No, we want Justin Wolfers. I hope that didn't claim me. If that claimed me, I'd be so pissed. You can't search for shorts on somebody?
America.
Too fast politics, Justin.
I'm not going to watch a 17-minute podcast. Yeah, I want to see shorts, but with Justin Wolfers. Maybe there are no shorts with Justin Wolfers. Ozzy, Ozzy, Ozzy. Oi, oi, oi.
Only going to negotiate if countries zero out the trade deficit.
We just watched that. It's so annoying that on X you can't see shit anymore. The last tweet I can see from him without an X account is from September 2024.
interpret the news. One of the hard things to do right now is to interpret the news that we're getting. So realize that stocks have fallen 12, 13% over the past
12, 13%. 13.
Few trading days. But realize they'd already priced in their best guess at what the Trump tariffs would look like. And even right now, they're pricing in a very large probability that Trump backs off. So if you took all of that out, that suggests that markets believe that the cost of these tariffs are much, much larger than the 12 or 13% that markets have subtracted as a result. So if they got clarity that Trump were going to stick with this, it would be even more calamitous. One of the hard things to
13. Everybody say it with me. 13.
Going to change people's lives in fundamental ways. When you say this is going to change people's lives in fundamental ways, what do you mean?
13.
Mate, next time you walk through the supermarket, just pick up that box of cookies or that pasta or that avocado and just look on the side for where it's made. Even when it says whether it's made in America, think about where the raw ingredients came from. And very quickly you'll discover that every part of our lives is profoundly integrated with the global economy. And what we now have is, on average, 20% tax on every interaction we have with the rest of the world. So we're going to have to shift what we buy, we shift how much we can afford, and the rest of the world's off doing business with each other. This is a shock very much on Americans.
13.
Significance of entering Justin, what's the significance of entering bear market territory?
I think it's partly people are worried about their 401ks, and I've had all sorts of retirees reach out to me terrified about what all of this means. But I think more importantly, it's the market's judgment on the whole Trump tariff agenda. According to Trump's theory of the case, what he's trying to do is make American business outperform. That putting tariffs on will help American business, and then there'll be flow-on effects from there. But what you see here is the market saying, no, we think that the value of American businesses is falling and fallen quite dramatically as a result of these tariffs. This is the tariffs. This is Wall Street screaming at the White House, if this is help, we don't want your help. Please stop.
That's an interesting point. It's kind of like what we're saying, like American businesses, they can't compete with the low wages. They'll be automated. So this is just Wall Street saying, like, no, this is not going to help.
Stop now.
That's an interesting point. 13. Justin Wilfus. That was bad.
Why it is I think markets hate this. Let me explain why it is I think markets hate this so much. Essentially, Trump grew up in an era where there was quite substantial tariffs on American businesses, and so some of his complaints would have been totally reasonable in 1960. It turns out today that very few countries, or a week ago I should say, actually have substantial tariffs on the United States at all. So what we have is, if we, quote, win this trade war, we might be able to get, say, Vietnam to eliminate all of its tariffs. Right now, Vietnam actually charges, on average, only a 1.1% tariff rate. And so if we win, we get a tiny reduction in tariffs. Now, in the meantime, what's happening is China has put a 34% tariff rate on the United States. So it's incredibly asymmetric. The stakes, if we win, are very small. The stakes that we're putting on line that we stand to lose are very large.
That's a good way to put it. A lot of risk for not much reward, even if it does turn out well. Cashing Out says, basically, Trump is a boomer who's booming. Oh, God, that's true. Yeah. Trump is talking as if America isn't a superpower now. We have the luxury to have trade deficits, and that's completely fine. That's an interesting point. This guy, Justin Wolfers, is smart. 13, but he says 13 wrong. He says 13, but it's actually 13. He said 13, but it is 13.
Things that's really unnerved all of us over the past few days. Look, one of the things that's really unnerved all of us over the past few days is not just the tariffs. It's the clown show that's come with it. It's tariffs on penguins. It's setting tariffs proportional to the bilateral trade deficit, which no economist on earth will tell you is defensible. And then it's sending out the entire cabinet to the Sunday shows, where each one of them on a different network gave a different rationale for what's going on, basically leaving us all with the conclusion that the global economy is being held hostage by the whims of just one man, which is not usually how we like democracies or economies to work.
Justin, appreciate your time.
Unfortunately, he won, though. I mean, he's our freaking president, but maybe the president shouldn't have that much power. Thirteen. Tim says the penguin tariff still crack me up. Me too. He was born in Papua New Guinea. You don't see that every day. I've never met anybody from Papua New Guinea. He's got a PhD in economics and a Master of Arts in economics from both Harvard and a bachelor from University of Sydney. He had a Fulbright scholarship. Oh, aren't you fancy, bro? Oh, I got a Fulbright scholarship and a PhD from Harvard. Pfft. Who's Betsy Stevenson? Oh my God. He was named as one of 13 young economists who were the future of economics. One of 13? Master says he's trying to extort other countries to give him stuff. He's used to people kowtowing to him in the Republican Party. He thinks other countries will do the same. That's fair. I'm pretty sure Democrats failed to take on Elon in 24 because whenever they tried attacking Trump, it didn't work because Elon had put on a force field around him. I'm not sure what you mean exactly. Raw Rugby says, weird one, but you guys must have made some good money from the election 23 stream. It's like 8 hours and over 1 million views. Watch time must be crazy. Weird one? What do you? I don't know what you mean by weird one. I think we made decent money from that stream. Yeah. To be frank, we didn't get rich from it or anything, but yeah, we made money from that. U.S. in talks with Iran. Yeah, I saw that. I hope it doesn't come across as a weird question. Oh, it was a little weird asking about my personal finances.
And of course, we also discussed Iran. Look, we're both united in the goal that Iran does not ever get nuclear weapons. If it can be done diplomatically in a full way, the way it was done in Libya, I think that would be a good thing. But whatever happens, we have to make sure that Iran does not have nuclear weapons. That's the end of my speech.
Mr. President, we're having direct talks with. Wait a minute. Wait. We're having direct talks with Iran, and they've started. It'll go on Saturday. We have a very big meeting, and we'll see what can happen. And I think everybody agrees that doing a deal would be preferable to doing the obvious. And the obvious is not something that I want to be involved with, or frankly, that Israel wants to be involved with if they can avoid it. So we're going to see if we can avoid it. But it's getting to be very dangerous territory. And hopefully those talks will be successful. And I think it would be in Iran's best interest if they are successful. We hope that's going to happen.
Interesting. Very interesting. Would I ever run for public office? I don't think so. I'm not much for politics. It's a slimy game. I'd rather keep myself unslimed, you know? It'd be funny if he just recreates the Obama-Iran deal. I don't want to make a splash, nah. If you don't get that joke, look up Allan Lichtman, Senate campaign ad.
We're having direct talks with Iran, and they've started. It'll go on Saturday. We have a very big meeting, and we'll see what can happen. And I think everybody agrees that doing a deal would be preferable to doing the obvious. And the obvious is not.
We just watched this. Raw Rugby says the only person I trust in office is the one wise enough to run the other way from it. You have my vote, yeah. But I can't have your vote if I don't run for anything. So, you know. I'd like to hear the amateur. We were talking about climate change earlier. I actually would be interested to hear Neil deGrasse Tyson's thoughts about climate change.
For perspective that I don't see often shared by people discussing climate change. So, couple of points. As you surely know, all evidence gathered from many branches of science point to human-induced changes in the climate.
God, I hope this music isn't copyrighted.
Of Earth since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. So you've heard that this contributes to the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect is where visible light hits Earth's surface absorbs it, and then radiates it in the infrared. And it's that infrared that gets trapped in the atmosphere, raising the temperature. That's the greenhouse effect in a nutshell. There are multiple kinds of greenhouse gases. Water vapor is a greenhouse gas. That's why humid environments, the temperature doesn't plunge very much at night when the sun sets. Look at the temperature range between midday and midnight in humid environments compared with very dry environments. You can have a 40-degree Fahrenheit shift from daytime highs to nighttime lows in desert climates. When you have a warmer Earth, you can sustain more water vapor into the gas, into the atmosphere. You may have remembered from chemistry. The warmer
I don't, Neil. I was not that good at chemistry.
Solution is, the more you can dissolve into it, the more it can hold. And we ask, well, what are the consequences of that? And everyone is saying, I don't see any change. What's a couple of degrees warmer? There's a lot of that talk. That's not the issue here. I'm not here to debate with anybody whether the models that predicted a temperature rise were bang on, low, or high. That's not my point. My point is, when you alter the climate in any way, you are changing what Earth's surface experiences compared with historical averages. So when Earth came out of its last ice age, oh, by the way, I voiced a character in Ice Age 5.
Ice Age 5? Damn, bro. The 3-camera setup is unneeded. I was actually enjoying it. I was like, damn, the cinematography for this is pretty good.
But billions and billions of years ago. Anyhow, after the Ice Age, our nomadic ancestors, trying to not die from a frozen Earth, finally see an Earth that warms up, naturally, by the way, but over thousands of years, warm up and become relatively stable. And they say to themselves, this is pretty good, and I'm tired of wandering, and I know how to control crops, and I can control distribution of food, goods, and resources. I'm going to build a city. Where are you going to put a city? You're going to put it on the water's edge, be it ocean, lake, on a river, typically. Why? Oh, because it enables transportation, commerce, irrigation, if you have crops. All the greatest cities of the world were built on the water's edge. Now that you have a city there, and you have this...
People in Des Moines, Iowa being like, bro, Des Moines not on the water's edge. Actually, maybe it is. I don't even know.
Sort of long run of relatively stable...
Is Des Moines... Is there any water in Des Moines? Oh, it looks like there is a river in Des Moines. Well, I'll be damned. The Des Moines River. Sorry, Des Moines, for insulting you twice. There's the Des Moines River. All right, there's got to be... All right, Phoenix obviously isn't on any sort of major waterway, right? But Phoenix is a newer phenomenon of a city. Albuquerque probably isn't, although maybe there is a river in Albuquerque. Is there a river in Albuquerque? The Rio Grande runs through Albuquerque? I had no idea. Wow, there is a river in Albuquerque. Huh. Oh, Las Vegas. Yeah. Definitely no river in Las Vegas. Or, yeah, nothing. I mean, there's like a... The Colorado River isn't that far. Actually. Phoenix got nothing. What is this little trickle here? The Salt River? Phoenix has a river? Now I'm getting confused. Now I'm confusing myself. I don't see no river, guys. All right, that doesn't count. All right. That doesn't count. Welcome to the Phoenix River. I didn't realize the Hoover Dam was that close to Vegas. I mean, LA doesn't have. I mean, LA has a man-made river, but it's not. It is on the. I mean, it's on the. It is on the water's edge, Ocean Bay, but the LA River is a pathetic excuse for a river. Come on. LA River is more of like a giant gutter than it is a river. I mean, does that count as a river? Man-made gutter, I would call it. Sam, do you feel nostalgia for LA? Yeah, a little bit. LA is effed when the climate will change. Yeah, LA could see some real issues. All right, let's do a poll. Does the LA River count as a river? Does the LA River count as a river? Raw Rugby says, FYI, our company makes most of its money from Snapchat now over YouTube. It could be one focus of clipping, as I'm sure you and Allan could attract a young audience on there. That's not a bad idea. The only time I saw the LA River look like a river was like when there was like a torrential downpour and it was actually flowing like an actual river. This is what it mostly looks like, actually. Just this one line of stuff. I'd say it's more of a gutter.
Stable climate post ice age. What does that even mean? Oh, stable climate doesn't mean nothing changes. It means over the decades, even over the centuries, the city...
Wolf says, as a European, I don't understand why California and New York State, for example, wouldn't go for independence. Why is this? Because the United States is so connected. And yeah, maybe California is as big as a European state, but Europe, they just formed differently. Europe formed as different tribes and empires, and like it just formed so differently. And the U.S. is so interconnected. It just would be a nightmare to try to disconnect all that interconnectivity, I feel like. Maybe all states should be their own country. I don't know. Sue A says, Canadian girl here. I'm so proud of my American neighbors protesting against Trump and his minions. ChatGPT says it is technically a river, but it was channelized in the 1930s, which makes it look that way. Oh, I see.
We'll see variations in the weather that are contained within a zone, within a band of variation. So you measure that range within the city, and then the city accommodates this fact. How? Oh, well, if there's a period where there's a little bit of a drought, you build in water supply that'll help get you through a drought. If it's get a certain amount of snow in modern times, you have a store of salt to put salt on the ground to melt the snow down to certain temperatures. All right, if it's a little too hot, you make sure that people have air conditioning. Do you realize the population of Texas went up significantly only after air conditioning became widespread and available? What's going on here?
It's the same with Florida, right? Raw Rugby says, me and my twin brother live hours apart but bond over watching you and Allan's channel. Love the content. Thank you. That's so nice. Master says, giving each state independence would be a horrific nightmare that I'm glad is not happening. Junaid says, do you think we should bring back manufacturing jobs through industrial policy and limited tariffs? I remember when Dems like Pelosi in the 90s were for it. I have to look more into that. I don't know much about that.
Is for every city, especially those built.
Master says, this was a challenge back in the 13 colonies. Each state had their own currency, for instance, and that didn't fend well. Yeah, I mean, even Europe now has a common currency for the most part. I mean, obviously not every country, but...
On the water's edge, there is life experience of the records of that city that tell people what is the range of weather that they can experience in snowfall, in rainfall, and in temperature especially. And the city works to accommodate.
Wait, if you were detained at any Maryland juvenile detention.
What are these ads, dude?
That range. And you know something?
What?
That's the range it has been in for thousands of years as these cities rose up to fit into the environment in which they were embedded. You go to Los Angeles, there's the LA River. When I was...
He must have heard us, guys.
First told there was an LA River, I said, that doesn't look like a river. It looks like a cement basin.
That's what I just said.
The LA River was built to accommodate flash floods, which was in the knowledge of residents and in the range of expectations for the weather of the region. If you're unfamiliar with the LA River, it made a cameo in the Terminator series, Terminator 2 especially. Arnold is riding his motorcycle in and out of the LA River because it's just a little trickle, which it is most of the time unless it rains heavily. That is a protection system against what we knew are the ranges of rainfall that LA would experience. All right, we are changing the climate. Climate change. When you change the climate, what happens is...
Sam DeGrasse Lichtman, that's right, bro.
No longer is the life experience of everyone who's ever lived in your city the full measure of what is possible in that city and why that city was built. Climate change around the world will take you out of that stability zone. You could get less rain than ever before, more rain than ever before. Temperatures can get colder than ever before, hotter than ever before. We are broadening the climatic experience that anyone has ever seen. As we go forward, we need to widen our expectations and understanding of what could possibly happen.
But that's hard. I mean, it costs a lot of time, money, resources to prepare a city for anything from no rain to lots of rain to snow to extreme heat. Like, you're right, but how do we do that?
What happened in New York City a few years ago? We had Hurricane Sandy. By the way, it wasn't even hurricane status by the time it came to New York, but it had conditions that we had never seen in the history of the city. The water level rose so high, it was higher than any previous level breached in the history of the city. Waters spilled around the entrances to our tunnels. Oh my gosh, major points of egress and ingress between Manhattan and the rest of the world, outside of our range, outside of the life experience of the city. So what did we do? We had to pump out the tunnels. That took a while, all right? There are these huge doors now that can close off the entrances and the exits to the tunnels.
I didn't know that. Did you know that? I didn't know New York made those. Yeah, America has pretty crazy cities like Arizona. Isn't it like crazy warm there? Yeah, it's in the middle of the desert, basically. Like if you look at a satellite version of America, it's actually kind of hard to tell because it's so built up, but you can see it's all arid, dry climate around it. I guess there's some forest up north of it, but the city itself is in the valley of the desert, basically. Like all of southern Arizona is basically just a desert.
That's a response to a new normal where the water levels might get higher than anyone had ever seen, not only in our lives, but in the life of the city itself. So as we go forward, yes, cities are going to have to do this. You're going to have to be ready for climatic events that fall outside of your experiences. The effects of climate change will not impact everyone equally around the world. Consider, for example, there are whole countries, island countries in the Pacific, where their average land elevation is low compared with sea level. As the world warms and we lose our ice cap from Antarctica and Greenland, which are the two major ice caps in the world, that melts back into the oceans. It's going to change the water levels and flood those countries. The military knows about this. They're called climate refugees, people whose country is gone because the warming of the earth changed the water levels that surrounded their countries. In England, it's getting warmer in England, a little bit outside their zone, okay? There's rumors that they're now making champagne in England. Okay, that's different for their economy. That's also a consequence of climate change. And in one of the airports in England a couple of years ago, during one of the heat waves, the tarmac was melting. Planes couldn't land. And the recent cold wave that emerged out of Canada down into the United States, it reached the Gulf states, shattering records for snowfall in Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. So I just wanted to add some perspective to what it means.
I love Neil. I don't think he said anything new. I think I knew. He started this saying, I don't hear anybody talking about climate change like this. Pretty sure everybody's talking about climate change like this.
When we talk about
I love you, but come on.
Climate change. Get ready for the new normal. And in most places on Earth, it's not going to be pretty.
That's scary.
Charles, welcome back.
I've seen some good things about Neil talking about DEI.
Tonight, NASA versus Elon Musk. So NASA's top officials firing back at Musk. One former senior NASA official, just moments ago, told CNN that they never received an offer from Musk's SpaceX to bring home the 2 U.S. astronauts stuck in space. They never got that offer. Now, why were they saying that? Well, because they were responding to Musk's claims that the 2 astronauts had been left in space for, quote, political reasons. The astronauts themselves, they're up there, and they had to deny this.
We don't feel abandoned. We don't feel stuck. We don't feel stranded.
I mean, they are on the International Space Station having to respond to this. I mean, it's just some moments in all this where you go, this is really insane. Multiple astronauts going after Musk, after these Mars, Biden wouldn't bring them to
just in case.
Travel. You
Yeah.
know, that when I was organizing, that's what I did. Okay, this topic.
Glitter Girl says the tariff situation. We are bracing ourselves and preparing to be hit hard. We are already dealing with inflation, high groceries, etc. My USA shopping trips have stopped. What my USA shopping trips have stopped? Like you come to the USA to shop? Oh, I see.
Right, Musk says that this was, political, that Biden wouldn't bring them down. They have to be, these astronauts denying it on the space station. NASA denies it. An astronaut says it's not true, and Musk, uses those horrible words to respond to the person. I mean, what is your response to all of this?
Well, let's go to the beginning of it all. The 2 astronauts were never stranded in any normal way we would use that term. And they were joining a half a dozen other astronauts on the International Space Station. There's plenty of food.
I don't need to hear them describe old news.
The best of
grew up. Yeah, so when I grew up, people said, oh, did you want to be an astronaut when you were a kid? I'm old enough to have lived through the 60s,
Yep.
the moon landing and the rest. And I said no, because it was clear they were not interested in me. by who they were sending into space.
You saw
Oh,
the
yeah.
lack of color.
As a child, I
Yes.
knew this.
All right, folks, I will be right back. I'm going to eat some food real quick. I'll be back in maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Hello. I'm back. Man, I was hungry. Good thing I ate. Where were we? I had what did I have? I had meatballs on top of like a veggie medley. Just some leftover stuff. I'm back, guys. I'm back. Back in the New York groove. I heard you reach for golden geoguess. Yeah, I tried, but I learned that you can only play 20 games a week. And I was over that threshold, so I didn't make it to the Gold 1 League.
Yes.
Neil deGrasse Tyson went on CNN on the one. Want to know what?
Top officials firing back at Musk. One former senior NASA official, just moments ago, told CNN that they never.
Oh my God. This is just the same video I just watched. I'm just going to watch the original.
Versus Elon Musk. So NASA's top official owns black holes, Mars, stars, and everything far. It is a prominent place on my bookshelf. I put it in the travel section. Should I ever get to
just in case
travel? You know, when I was organizing, that's what I did. Okay, this topic.
That's a nice way to say, like, I have your book. I haven't read it, but I have it.
Right, Musk says that this was, political, that Biden wouldn't bring them down. They have to be, these astronauts denying it on the space station. NASA denies it. An astronaut says it's not true, and Musk, uses those horrible words to respond to the person. I mean, what is your response to all of this?
Well, let's go to the beginning of it all. The two astronauts were never stranded in any normal way we would use that term. And they were joining a half a dozen other astronauts on the International Space Station. There's plenty of food. Maybe they didn't bring enough changes of underwear. I don't know. But that would be like the worst.
Yeah, how do they do I don't think they can do laundry in space, right?
Worst case scenario. They're both experienced astronauts. And while I don't remember whether this is the longest time they spent in zero G in their astronaut career, but it's a while, and so they have to adjust to that, but they're professionals. So they're not stranded. Second, what a luxury it is to have a conversation about he said, she said, and who said what, when, I mean, think about it. We have options to bring them back from space. One of them is SpaceX.
Right.
And that's evidence to me that we are living in the future, that no one is worried about whether there exists a ship to bring them back. The Starliner for Boeing, that had some risk factors. NASA was not going to take that risk. So you push that aside. Who's up next? There's SpaceX. I'm good with that. And the rest of this is just distraction.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is unfortunate. I say, you read it and you think about people reading it and people using such words, especially people who have achieved so much and you run SpaceX, you have all of the things that someone has to speak like that. At best, it's deeply unfortunate. Let me ask you, Neil, also, the other context here is these asteroids, right? So then the city killer asteroid, I guess it's called.
Well, meanwhile, there's asteroids bearing down on Earth.
So,
maybe
so
somebody
in
should
case we don't destroy it ourselves, there's something else to do it. They're downplaying.
Down circle, such that Earth closes the moon.
Neil Stephenson book I enjoyed, right? You break up the moon and the pieces start coming down.
Yeah.
But I know asteroids are brought about.
Yes. We have some recovery, not give as much energy. That immediately, because one piece, so when one
these executive orders.
Headed towards
Here we go.
Yeah. All right. So now let me ask you also about these executive orders, the DEI orders that are now, at first I think people felt maybe in some of the government agencies.
I hope the U.S. government will go back and have their own rockets. It seems wrong to have a private company for that. I wouldn't count on it. I think those days are over.
Okay, it's just rhetoric. call it whatever you want to call it, continue with it. It now appears that that's not the case, right? This is not rhetoric, this is reality. Look at NASA, for example, the web pages that would talk about the diversity of the space program. Just to say, look at how diverse our program is. This is something that we are proud of. Look at the 404 warning you get now. It's gone. Programs promoting diversity and inclusion, even Black History Month, or Black astronauts, women astronauts, minority astronauts, just things, again, that the space program that NASA was proud of appear at this point to have been shut down. You sit here as a Black astrophysicist. How are you processing this?
Yeah, so when I grew up, people said, oh, did you want to be an astronaut when you were a kid? I'm old enough to have lived through the 60s, the moon landing and the rest. And I said no, because it was clear they were not interested in me.
That's sad.
By who they were sending into space.
You saw the lack of color.
As a child, I knew this.
Mm-hmm.
But it was more than that. Everyone was wearing like crew cuts at a time when the Broadway musical Hair was number one.
Right.
So there was some mismatches between who we were sending in space and what culture was doing. I still valued that we were going into space, but I didn't feel like I was a part of that. And with DEI, so I always viewed that as a way to encourage agencies to look in places you hadn't looked before for talent that you...
Exactly, that's what DEI is. It isn't quotas, it isn't race-based numbers.
Been missing. Yeah. And so if we're going to stop that, and you think every person who's the right who's correct for a job is white male, that's I don't know what that means. Yeah. And to fire a 4-star Air Force general with an advanced degree in aerospace engineering, replace him with someone who is who's not a general, a 3-star general. We would be the first 3-star general as head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff ever. That seems like a different form of DEI. It's like,
no doubt, it's called loyalty.
You're favoring someone else who's not even qualified.
All right, Neil. Well, thank you.
Tell him, Neil. Tell him, Neil. Tell him, Neil. SpaceX hasn't done anything NASA hasn't.
Before I understood what nuclear...
Has SpaceX done anything NASA hasn't? That's the question. Too many commercials, man.
Elon announces he's going to send an uncrewed mission to Mars. He and I got into a little dust-up in recent weeks. Consider that he hasn't done anything that NASA hasn't already done.
Got him.
The actual space frontier is still held by NASA. And I was surprised to see some headlines because it largely misrepresented what I actually said publicly.
Oh.
Didn't so much misrepresent it, but it made more of it than I did. Maybe because they felt it could serve as good clickbait. Let's go back a few years when Elon and SpaceX was commissioned by NASA to bring cargo to the space station. That was headlines. Oh my gosh, opening a new frontier in space, private enterprise, will they lead the way? And big headlines. And I thought, what? He's taking cargo to the space station, something NASA's been doing for decades. So now private enterprise is going to do it. How that fact could turn into, oh my gosh, private enterprise is going to lead the way, I didn't see how one connects to the other.
I get that.
Here's my point. The history of really expensive things ever happening in civilization has, in essentially every case, been led geopolitically by nations. Nations lead expensive projects. And when the cost of these projects are understood, the risks are quantified, and the timeframes are established, then private enterprise comes in later. to see if they can make a buck off of it. That's perfectly normal and natural arc in the history of major funded projects. If the project does not require much money, then private enterprise could do it because it's a relatively low risk fitted into their R&D budget. Fine. I'm talking about major allocations of the resources of a civilization. Like,
I mean, SpaceX gets major allocations from the government, right?
China building the Great Wall, like Europe building cathedrals, and
we need more modern examples, Neil. Come on.
Churches, a huge investment of time, energy, and effort, like the Apollo program, the Manhattan Project. All of these are instigated by either governments and, in the case of the cathedrals, praise of deity. The pyramids add those, praise of royalty. These are forces that dislodge money from the coffers of a civilization. So what has private enterprise been doing? They've been going back into orbit, where NASA has been since 1962 with the launch of John Glenn. And so when does private enterprise lead us into space? I personally don't see that happening, because if you want to lead into space, what are you doing? You're going where no one has gone before. Often it involves risk that a company that has investors will not take.
Right, but NASA's not getting funded properly.
Unless there's very clear...
He's right, no gods, no big buildings.
return on investment, ROI. Governments don't need a financial return on investment if they can get a geopolitical return on the investment. This is how power is established. Has been.
What are your thoughts on the suspicious spike in Trump's media stock price in 24? I don't know what you mean by that.
Ever been established in the world. For example, private enterprise has been doing things that NASA's been doing for the past 6 decades. By the way, they've been doing it for cheaper. I can say without hesitation, SpaceX has been advancing the engineering frontier of space exploration, especially with the spectacle of the returning of the first stage back to Earth so that you can reuse it. I've said this before, if you flew a Airbus A380 or Boeing 747 to Europe from the United States, and when you landed, they shoved it off a cliff and rolled out another one, your trip to Europe would be really expensive. So reusability matters. So these are tremendous triumphs of SpaceX in this space, pun intended. Can I think of it as a space frontier being pushed? I can't really do that.
I don't know if I agree with him. I mean, it's part of the space frontier being explored. I think it counts.
I can't think of it that way. I said that. Then I got interviewed. The press interviewed me. It made it to India. You said...
India?
Space hasn't accomplished anything. No, I did not say that. Okay? Again, that's clickbait. That's like creating a feud where there really wasn't one. All right.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it seems to me like he's missing a key part of the story. Like, yeah, NASA has always been pushing forward. They've always been the next step in the new frontier, which is space, but they haven't really done much in a while. And it seems like maybe these private companies are eventually going to do that, and they're demonstrating that by doing things like return launches. So I don't know if I entirely agree with him.
An enterprise will at. Okay? Again, that's clickbait. That's like creating a feud where there really wasn't one. All right. I said that private enterprise will do what nations have done, and they'll do it more cheaply. If there's an occasion for private enterprise to do something that nations have never done before, that's a very serious conversation in the funding room. Venture capitalist. Elon, what do you want to do? Oh, I want to send astronauts to Mars.
Sauceboss says SpaceX still uses an antiquated fuel source to escape gravity. I don't know what you mean by that exactly.
How much will it cost? A lot, possibly $1 trillion. Is it dangerous? Yes. Will people die? Probably. What's the return on that investment? I can't think of one right now. That's a 5-minute meeting. So how would Elon get to send his rockets to Mars? From the playbook of the history of geopolitics. What'll happen? The United States decides we need to send astronauts to Mars one day, geopolitically, by whatever force is operating on us. And then NASA looks around and says, we don't have a rocket to do that. And then Elon says, I have a rocket, and rolls out his rocket to Mars. Then we ride a SpaceX rocket to Mars. That could easily happen. But I just want to make it clear, it's not a mission initiated by a private company.
That's a fair point.
Because the money for that is not going to come from his earnings on
That's a fair point.
anything else he does in space. It's going to come from taxpayers funding NASA's goals, inspired by the geopolitics of the world at that time. So I'm delighted to see that Elon at SpaceX has announced that in the coming years, they're going to send uncrewed rockets to Mars. These are vessels that are equipped to carry people, but you wouldn't send people first if you're still sort of getting the bugs out of the system. So that's great. That would be advancing a space frontier. You know why? No one has ever sent a rocket to Mars that could have carried people. That would be advancing a space frontier. I look forward to that. And I don't know enough.
How is Mars going to solve the problem of gravity? Well, I don't understand your question. What's the problem of gravity? I don't understand what you're saying.
Details, is he going to bring him back? You kind of need to do that if you're going to have people there, unless they signed up for a one-way trip. And Mars is not quite ready to receive people on a one-way trip. All right? You got to wait for the terraforming for that to happen. You'd want to bring them back. By the way, that round trip would take several years, and a minimum energy transfer from Earth's orbit to Mars orbit takes just under a year to do that.
Well, here's my big question. Why do we need to spend all these resources to go to Mars? For scientific reasons, I could get it, maybe. But it seems like, why don't we focus on solving the problems on our Earth? Moving to Mars, there's no oxygen on Mars. We would have to live in cities with like no outdoor space. Like, there are so many problems that would present themselves on Mars to us. Wolf says, people are not living on Antarctica. Why the hell do we want to go to Mars? Exactly. Like, establishing civilization on Mars would be so... I mean, we were designed biologically to live on this Earth. We would have to simulate that on Mars, which would create so many problems. Sooner or later, we have to leave Earth. Do we? Do we? Or are we just meant to sort of succumb to our fate here on Earth? I mean, we do to survive the human race. Does this human race need to survive? Maybe. I'm not sure. I don't have the answer to that question.
Then if you want a minimum energy return, you got to wait until Earth and Mars.
So what? We're just going to all live in pod cities on Mars? I mean, that sounds horrific. Sun grows bigger and will swallow the Earth. Maybe that's just what's supposed to happen, though. Maybe that's just the end of our Earth, and that's that. That's not what space exploration is. What do you mean exactly? Yeah, but why stay? Because this is where we're meant to, this is where we were biologically designed to live. Right, and also the sun, yeah, and 4 billion, yeah. Are we even going to be here when the sun explodes? Sauceboss says, we need to solve our energy problems first before going anywhere close to light speed needs a lot of energy to reach Earth-like planets.
Mars or...
It's about making effing new things that only can exist when these type of problems are presented. It's about making new things that can only... Yeah, but are those things necessary? So your kids should die in the heat? I mean, no. Obviously, I don't want that. But Earth and the planet and the universe is about thousands and millions and billions of years of things coming into existence and changing and growing and adapting and new species. And I mean, I don't know. No, of course, when you present it in that question, like, what, you want your future grandchildren to die? Of course not. What do you sleep on? Memory foam mattress, NASA. Scratch resistance lenses. I'm not saying NASA is not incredibly beneficial to our humanity, and I'm not saying exploring space isn't extremely beneficial to our humanity. But this idea that we need to relocate to Mars is where I start to draw a line.
Properly configured once again in our respective orbits, and then you can take advantage of that configuration and then come back. So a full round trip is...
I think we should do everything possible to prevent humans from dying on Earth. But why? Because humans have done a lot of damage to this Earth, so we're just going to keep moving humanity from planet to planet and destroying said planet until... and whatever resources, or, I mean, there's no life on Mars, obviously, but whatever exists there already.
Several years. So I look forward to this and see how that unfolds. Those are definitely the first steps. By the way, the current American program to return to the moon, it's called Artemis, has 3 planned missions. The first was an uncrewed mission to the moon. It went to the moon and came back, splashed down in the ocean. Good. Second is a crewed mission to the moon, but not land yet. Third would be a crewed mission to the moon where you land, right? Incremental steps, just as Apollo had unfolded. That's one of the reasons why there were many Apollo.
Also, why do we need to go back to the moon?
Missions. Each one was incrementally more ambitious than the previous one. So,
Saucebot says, I think eventually we will be visited by aliens just like natives were visited by explorers back in the age of discovery. You might get to Mars, but like, so what? I don't know. Most smart physicists I've listened to are not big alien folks.
This is how space works. If you want to stay safe in the process, especially when it involves people, crew, astronauts, and yeah.
Also, about the sun exploding, Mars is also in our solar system. So if the sun explodes, Mars is also screwed.
Forward to seeing what comes of that. Good luck, SpaceX. Godspeed to you.
It doesn't explode. All right, well, if it gets bigger, it's going to affect all planets in the solar system. Origins and Tall Tale says, Sam has a great point. Climate change should be the 100% focus. That's sort of what I'm saying. It's like we have a place to live. We have a place to live that is literally tailor-made for us to live on. We were biologically, evolutionarily developed to live here. Aquí. The sun's not changing for 3.5 to 4 billion years. No rush on that one. Rich says we can't stay here. We won't. I don't know. Is that how much of that urge of like we can't stay here is based off of like science fiction and some idea of like human discovery or something, and how much of it is real? There's just not enough materials and elements here on Earth to make something like a Millennium Falcon. Those materials are going to have to come from somewhere else. Right. Again, that's still different than moving humanity to a new place. Scientists cannot help themselves with wanting advancement, but then they say climate change is existential crisis, so they kind of contradict themselves. Good point. Good news, Sam. You won't go to Mars. Good point. Some random dude is going to Mars in like 200 years. That's fair. And like, even if we run out of resources on Earth, like I still feel like humans can adapt here better than they could adapt just because there's some mineral on Mars that would be helpful. don't know. Like, all the time and energy we've spent on SpaceX and their Mars exploration, how much of that time and energy could have been spent on addressing climate change here on Earth first?
America.
Neil deGrasse Tyson roasts MAGA more on Patrick Bet-David in debate.
Or not at the, we don't even know if the vaccine worked or not at the time.
Yes. Oh my God, a vaccine debate.
That's what the trials are.
Please roast this guy, Neil, with science.
Dude, that's why these trials...
Walk and chew gum. Yeah, but we're not walking and chewing gum. We're just we're taking all these resources and spending all of this time and energy on SpaceX. And you could argue that we're going backwards on the climate agenda.
Are you missing data out there?
Neil deGrasse Tyson joined Patrick Bet-David on hands the right from it's complicated bottles and some talking over
what we know
comments, but let's get into it.
From what we knew at the beginning of COVID to what we know today, what do we know about the vaccine today that we didn't know while we were all testing it in America, taking it? What have we learned now?
What do you mean testing it on America? There were tests before it was released.
9 months is not a long time to test.
No, but it was tested.
Yeah, but 9 months. The average is 30. The average is 5 to 10 years. I mean, 9 months is not enough.
Okay, so you have to say.
But wasn't RMNA whatever it's called? Wasn't it tested long before? I don't want to listen to this. I'm sure Neil deGrasse Tyson roasts him. He doesn't know what he's talking about. I don't want to get into a vaccine thing.
Galaxy.
We have no evidence of alien civilizations at all. That might mean we haven't looked hard enough because we haven't looked particularly hard.
Why do all these shorts have freaking copyrighted music?
I would be delighted.
All these have music in them.
A civilization, let's give it, say, 40,000 years. I don't know how long our civilization has been around. Let's say that. The galaxy is pretty much as old as the universe. It's 13 billion years worth of time. So the idea that there are no civilizations arose, 100 million years ago, 200 million years ago, 1 billion years ago. And imagine what they'd be like if they'd survived. I mean, we've been around, we've had science for, let's say, since Newton or Copernicus, 500 years at most. And look what we've done. We've gone beyond the solar system with Voyager. We've walked on the moon. We're about to go to Mars, I would think. So we're about to begin colonizing our own solar system. So we've done that in 500 years. So imagine a million years in the future. So it's one of the arguments often used to say there aren't any civilizations out there in the galaxy. It's called a civilization. Let's.
Oh, that was not.
The thing is, there's a thing called the Fermi paradox.
Yes.
Which I think we talked about before on the show.
Yes.
And the paradox is, if we haven't seen it, let's assume we haven't seen any evidence of anything. That's a paradox.
They all have music.
We have no evidence of aliens.
I already watched this one.
On February 2nd,
go into space. That you can use to travel into the past. What's your star sign? I know. Right. What is the best bit of evidence for alien life? We don't have any evidence for alien life, is the answer. So in the past, so we've landed missions on Mars, for example, the Viking missions in the 1970s, there was some suggestion that there might be some chemical reactions that looked a bit like life, and then it turned out that it probably wasn't, because it's very difficult to distinguish geology.
How many thousands of years did it take for Colin Farrell to wash up in Virginia and spook the tribes? If we follow that pattern, eventually something is going to land here and build an... I don't necessarily think those two things are related, because yes, that's possible, but it doesn't prove that that is the case. It doesn't... We don't even know if there's life elsewhere, so that would have to be the first barrier you'd have to jump over before you'd even get to that statistical problem. We have people who testified in Congress about aliens, and not to forget that. Yeah, but that testimony was bullshit. And just because somebody testifies in Congress just means that they believe it. It doesn't mean it's real.
Yeah, and chemistry.
Why is it BS? Because none of it was corroborated. It was just people coming up and talking about their own personal views or experiences. That doesn't mean anything.
From biology, when you don't know what the kind of biology... Right. What is the best bit of evidence for alien life? We don't have any evidence for alien life, is the answer. So in the past, so we've landed missions on Mars, for example, the Viking missions in the 1970s, there was some suggestion that there might be some chemical reactions that looked a bit like life, and then it turned out that it probably wasn't, because it's very difficult to distinguish geology and chemistry from biology when you don't know what the kind of biology is that you're looking for. And so the answer is we don't have any evidence of alien life, of life beyond Earth, but we're looking. So that's the answer. And then everyone will whinge about that. We'll go, what about that flying saucer that landed in Chicago or something? And I'll say, I don't believe it did. What?
I mean, I feel like he's making a pretty clear case here that we haven't even gone from 0 to 1. So to say that this happened on Earth, therefore there are aliens, we need to go from there is life to we have no evidence to maybe there is some evidence. Do you agree we should spend more time and money fighting disinformation than going to Mars? I think both. Smart physicists like this, when I hear them say we don't have any evidence of alien life, then my reaction is, okay, before I spend time speculating based off of unrelated things, I'm going to wait until they start saying maybe there is some evidence for alien life. Hello, Nikki. And again, because there's no evidence doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't exist. But because there's no evidence, it doesn't mean that it does exist either. And don't hang your hat on people testifying in Congress, because it's just people sharing their own personal stories. There's no scientific backing behind any of their testimony. There's like a crazy, my dad talks about this, there's like a crazy statistical rule that like if you poll random people about aliens, like 9% will say they've been abducted by aliens, right? So it's like, just because somebody exists saying that there are aliens doesn't mean that they exist. Again, the advancement that these types of space exploration research brings is things we don't know can exist yet. Prime example of that is the MRI machine. How many lives does the MRI I think you're arguing something that I'm not saying, Mehdi, to be honest with you. I'm not saying that space exploration is important, that NASA is important, that they've done great things that have saved humanity. I'm just saying that let's weigh these things and put them in order of most important to address and least important to address. And again, I'm not saying that aliens don't exist. All I'm saying is that all the people who study this said that they haven't found evidence yet. So I'm not going to spend all my time and resources and thought on something that we don't even know, have zero evidence of at this moment. Is there a connection between all those nuclear bombs being tested in Nevada and Nevada UFO activity? I mean, if I was scanning a planet for stuff, I saw a bunch of craters and radioactivity. I don't know if anything you're saying, I don't know if Nevada UFO activity is because it's just, we don't know why there's more UFO activity in that region of the world. Is it because of radioactive scans? Maybe. Is it because it's just a desolate place on Earth and you can see the sky better and there's not as much light pollution? So in Los Angeles or New York, you just can't see the sky. Maybe that's why. I mean, that prioritization is based on your or a certain group of value systems. It's semantically identical to Trump thinking the first problem is doing tariffs. Right, but as a society, we do that, and we have to. That's the only way we know how to do things. Yeah, I mean, obviously there are bad people and bad priorities, but as a civilization, we have to decide which ones are bad and which ones aren't, and which ones, we should give most of our attention to or less attention to, or I don't know. What scientists work on should not be a matter of vote. But it is, because, I mean, as Neil deGrasse Tyson just said, most of our scientific or great scientific explorationary missions are based on geopolitical factors. They're not based, I mean, I don't know what else you would base them on. He didn't say that. He said governments do it for geopolitical reasons. Right, but who runs NASA? The government. Who runs NIH? The government. F Elon, but SpaceX can do things that NASA can't. Maybe you're right. I don't know. You could be right. But again, what is, like he just said, what is SpaceX based off of? Their investors, the return on investment, which is a much different analysis than how government assess things. What if all life recognizes patterns? All life, I mean, that's a big, I don't think all life recognizes patterns that you're talking about. And an odd pattern of non-naturally occurring fallout in Nevada attracts a lot of attention from space folks. Well, I think you're making so many generalizations here. All life recognizes Nevada as a space place. That's not true. What do you mean by space folks? I don't see Neil deGrasse Tyson or Brian Cox being like, everybody run to Nevada right now. Oh my God, not this guy got permission to post again. Tim says, I can't believe that in all the universes that exist, ours is the only one with life. Okay, don't believe that. That's perfectly fine. But you can't tell me that you have proof that you're right. And therefore all humanity has to follow that principle, because that's just a belief. And a personal belief. It may be held by many people, but not one that's proven. I think it's a closed-minded belief. What is a closed-minded belief? Road to 10K. Let's go, Jordan. Sauce Boss says, I like Earth life, beers and boobs. I'm good. Me too. Do you agree most important issue is fighting disinformation? Do I agree that the most important issue on Earth is fighting disinformation? No. It's a closed-minded belief to assume that we're the only ones here. Why? Why is that closed-minded? I'm not saying we're the only ones here. I'm just saying I haven't seen any evidence to the contrary, other than speculation and unrelated comparisons. I'm not saying I'm closed to the idea that there are others. I'm saying I'm waiting to see the proof. And I don't know, I've seen very smart people talk about the fact that exact point. Well, the universe is so big and so vast, there must be life. Not necessarily. And again, not that we've seen. So it's like, if the probability so far is 0, it may just continue to be 0. That's quite possible. I'm not saying it's not possible that there's life on other planets. I'm just saying we haven't found any proof of it yet. And I also kind of believe sort of what Brian Cox was saying, that first thing is like, also the universe is so old that the chances of two highly advanced civilizations lining up to also explore each other at the same time in time and space and have the chances of that are so low. Dennis says, the most important thing for us to do is to support Sam's channel. Dennis, you're too nice. Thank you for that donation. Of course, there's no evidence. However, if there are billions or perhaps more planets that have all of the known building blocks like water of life, what makes us think it can't happen? That's my whole point. I didn't say it can't happen. Thank you, Nikki, for becoming a member. I think you're getting my argument confused. I'm not saying it can't happen or it will happen or eventually we'll discover it. I'm saying so far there is no evidence. That's all I'm saying. And I'm not here saying that I'm right. I'm just sharing my perspective. You very well may be right.
We know that on average, every single star, on average, has a planet going around it, and about 1/5 or so of them have Earth size.
All right, let me just read this because I don't want the. We know that this is from, I forgot what this guy's name is, but he's a famous scientist. We know on average every single star, on average, has a planet going around it, and about 1/5 or so of them have Earth-sized planets going around them. So do the math. We're talking about out of 100 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy, we're talking about billions of potential Earth-sized planets, and to believe that we're the only one is, I think, rather ridiculous. So he agrees with you. Again, I'm just sharing my perspective. Dr. Michio Kaku. Given the odds and how many galaxies there are within the sight of the Hubble telescope, there are about 100 billion galaxies. So do the math. How many stars are there in the visible universe? But none of this proves anything. It just, again, it's more speculation. And that's perfectly fine. 100 billion galaxies times 100 billion stars per galaxy. We're talking about a number beyond human imagination. And to believe that we're the only ones, I think that's rather ridiculous. So he agrees with you.
Planets exist. The galaxy, how many billion Earth-like planets exist?
The galaxy, 20 billion, something like that. It's 1 in 10 stars.
So the odds of complex life out of our incredibly fortunate situation, but the odds of that occurring on any of these billions of other planets that exist.
We don't know, but let's say it was on the fortunate side. We're talking about, give or take, 4 billion years, right? From the origin of life to now. And we have a civilization now, and we've had it. Our species has been around, what, a quarter?
Hey, we already watched this. This was the point I just said earlier. It's like, even if it did exist, the chances of us lining up perfectly are so small.
A million years or something. So it's just now, basically. So let's say 4 billion is on the fortunate side. Let's say that it was double that or triple that on the average. Suddenly that's the age of the universe, right? And that's a third of the age of the universe it took. So how many of those worlds have been stable for 3 or 4 billion years? That's quite a tall order, actually.
Right. So here's the opposite side of the statistical perspective. That guy before was saying, look how many stars there are. All right, but if we dig deeper, now let's think about time. And when you add time into the equation, that starts to muddy the initial equation that you gave.
Let's talk about life on other planets, life as we know it. What do you think?
It would be inexcusably egocentric to suggest that life as we know it on Earth is the only life there is in the universe. Once you just look at the size of the universe, the age of the universe, and the presence of the chemistry that defines life as we know it, that chemistry is everywhere in the cosmos. We're carbon-based life with hydrogen and oxygen and nitrogen and comprising our body chemistry. Look around the universe, those same ingredients are there on all the planets we've ever looked on. So chemically, we're not rare. Now, we haven't found life yet, but we're looking. But anyone who's studied the problem has such high confidence that life is going to be out there somewhere that we are directing our resources to look for it.
There you go. He agrees with you. Or whoever. I mean, I don't know what you mean by you. Thank you, Nikki, for becoming a member. I appreciate that. Glue Cement says more speculation, it's statistical probability. Yeah, I agree with you. And the question isn't whether or not aliens exist, but whether or not aliens exist elsewhere in our solar system. Aren't we pretty sure that they don't exist elsewhere in our solar system? Do you think Trump will be successful in gaining his third term? No.
it would be egocentric to suggest.
He has that egocentric line, doesn't he?
Pluto, for example, there is every chance that life could have started there.
A new species of dog, yeah.
One of the ways that we first go out into the solar system to look for life is not to look for life itself. Initially, we're just going to look for environments like we've been doing on Mars. We're looking for those kind of saline, watery environments that might have hosted life in the past. You then get to the exoplanets. So far away, we can't directly see them. Initially, we're just looking for whether the planet is hot or cold, and how close it is to its star.
A Goldilocks zone.
The Goldilocks zone is sort of being a little bit disproven more recently because we're starting to now in our solar system see environments like Pluto, for example, not in the Goldilocks zone, but it's geologically active. And, there is every chance that life could have.
Yeah, that's another thing. I mean, me personally, it's like people are getting very obsessed about these like Earth-like planets. I mean, that could or couldn't prove that life exists there. There could be non-Earth-like planets with life, or there could be Earth-like planets with no life. Earth-like it doesn't necessarily prove that there is life there. It just means the only thing it proves is that it's like Earth.
Started there because it's got all kind of the right conditions.
A new species of dog, yeah.
There's labradoodles all over.
Labradoodles.
Pluto.
Don't laugh at labradoodles. I have a labradoodle.
Planets all over the place. There are more planets.
God damn, all these have music on them. Anyways, I gotta get going. But my only point is that I haven't seen any evidence. Smart people are saying no evidence. There's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of statistics on one side to prove one thing, on the other side to prove another thing, and that's all that creates is speculation and debate. So, are there other living life forms in the universe? Maybe. I think that's the best answer we can give. I think to say it's egotistical to not think, or it's like it's like none of us know. Nobody has an answer. I don't get this argument. Proof is not proof. What is proof? That's not proof. I'm saying that is not proof. Earth-like does not prove. On an LSAT, if you were doing a logical reasoning answer, if they say Earth has life, there are other Earth-like planets. Therefore, there is life, or has been life, or will be life on these other planets. That would be a logical fallacy. You are jumping to a conclusion which is not quite linked yet. Dang, so everything is a maybe? No, we have proven some things. Not everything is a maybe. Science has proven a lot of things. All right, folks, I gotta go. We will be live tomorrow with Lichtman Live at 9 p.m. Eastern, and in the post show after that. I appreciate you all coming here and discussing, and just know that all of your thoughts and comments are valid, and it's fun to explore them and to talk about them, and I appreciate all of you immensely. Good night.